Chapter 147. Qing Liangzhu had fought against great demons in the true state and killed cultivators who were at the peak of the transcendent state. The person in front of him, who called himself Li Yunxin, had the body of a yin god. He was at the peak of the transcendent state and had the strength of an emptiness state. Qing Liangzhu believed that he could not defeat him, but his heart was filled with alarm because of the words crushed into a pile of dregs. Because of this warning sign that had allowed him to turn defeat into victory in countless critical moments, the cultivator no longer had the time to ponder the other party's true identity. He only roared without hesitation, "In your mother's autumn dreams." After this shout, the cultivator slapped the back of his head and spat out a green light sword from his mouth. He grabbed it with his right hand and swung it diagonally. The light sword turned into a thin sword that shone with a cold light. Then Qing Liangzhu leaped forward and quickly wrote runes on the sword with his left hand. He shouted bravely, "I want to learn from Grandpa's Tao of dual cultivation." Normally, it would be comical for an 11 or 12-year-old child beggar to shout like this. However, at this moment he crossed the 10 steps between them in an instant. At this moment he wrote 6 runes on the sword with his left hand. The sword was infused with mana and turned red like when it was taken out of the furnace. The red light moved and tore through the air. When it was about to pierce Li Yunxin's chest, there was a loud bang. With the point of contact as the center, a violent air wave and mist swept across the street, crushing the green stone slabs under their feet into fine powder. The stone powder, mist, and distorted air mixed together, and the long street was immediately covered in a cloud of white mist. However, there were sparks from the point where the tip of the sword touched Li Yunxin's body. It was as if steel was squeezing steel or iron was swallowing rocks. The air was heated up because of the fierce attack, and the mist was dispersed in the next moment, causing a second wave of even more intense air wave. It revealed Li Yunxin and Qing Liangzhu. In the blink of an eye, the cultivator took 10 steps forward and stabbed his sword into Li Yunxin's chest. At this moment, where he had been standing, the dust that had been stirred up by his sudden and violent attack had yet to settle, but he had already stabbed 16 times consecutively at a point on Li Yunxin's left chest. This had already surpassed the limits of what the eyes of Daotong cultivators could capture. It was precisely because the 16 stabs overlapped and compressed the air in an instant that the second explosion occurred. It was also at this moment that Li Yunxin had the time to lower his head and take 3 steps back. Then he looked at his chest. Even his clothes were not torn. Qing Liangzhu didn't chase after him either. That was because the 16 sword strikes just now were one of the killing moves of the Lin Su sword school of Kenzo, but they hadn't been able to injure him in the slightest. Li Yunxin raised his hand and dusted his clothes. He looked at him with a smile and shook his head. "Fast enough but not strong enough, my friend. With this kind of ability, how could he kill my parents openly?" Qing Liangzi slowly lowered his sword and pointed the tip of the sword to the ground. He snorted coldly, "It's just a test. Let's see what kind of ability you have. But you do have some tricks." Li Yunxin stood 3 steps away from him. He clasped his hands behind his back and smiled. "This method is very simple. It's because I made a painting of the Overlord's carapace, a rare scroll. It would be strange if you could break this painting with your insignificant strength at the peak of the transcendent stage." As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his bosom. The paper was yellow papyrus used by Moon Enju to keep accounts. He had used a bald pen to hastily draw a picture scroll. But it still couldn't conceal the astonishing flow of spiritual power on it. Then Li Yunxin casually tore the picture to pieces. He threw it to the ground. "Since it's a method that I said, I won't use it a second time." Qing Liangzi's eyes widened because of this action. "You really are that Li Yunxin? Aren't you dead? And now you're a ghost cultivator? What kind of trick are you playing now? I'm going to crush you into dregs. Friend, why are you so forgetful?" Li Yunxin snorted in a low voice and looked at him with a smile. "I'll show you the methods that my parents taught me one by one. I'll let you know how stupid your so-called righteousness is to Taoist Danqing's so-called righteousness." Hearing this, Qing Liangzi was so angry that he laughed. He raised his head and looked at Li Yunxin. The thin sword in his hand trembled like a snake that was about to pounce and bite people. "You arrogant kid. You think you're great because you blocked my previous attack with a rare scroll? Now I'll show you what I'm really capable of." Qing Liangzi didn't move after saying this. But his body suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. His entire person seemed to have turned into a sun in an instant, illuminating the entire alley. It was in this golden light that Qing Liangzi shouted in a low voice, "Xuanya Golden Light Method." At the same time, Qing Liangzi raised his left arm and wrote 3 words in the air with a drop of blood from the beggar's fingertip. Yang. Ta. Once the words were written, the mysterious power of the Daotong talisman immediately came out in response to the sky. Wherever the golden light reached in the alley, everything slowed down by half a beat. It was as if it had fallen into a sticky, stagnant, and inescapable swamp of light. Beside Li Yunxin, a small light man suddenly formed in the air in the light. When it formed, it pulled out a sword and stabbed at Li Yunxin's chest. But Li Yunxin dodged this sword with a tilt of his body. The light grazed his left shoulder and shot into the ground. A small piece of soil instantly turned into bright red lava. But this was just the beginning. After the first light man appeared, more light men appeared one after another in the air around him. The golden sword light shot at him from all kinds of unimaginable angles like a storm. But Li Yunxin dodged them all. He was only 3 steps away from the cultivator, but he didn't try to fight with him. Because every cultivator knew that when a Daotong Taoist cast a spell, the most dangerous place was right in front of them. A powerful restriction would appear along with the talisman within 3 steps of them. Within those 3 steps, danger was everywhere. But in such a dangerous place, Li Yunxin's speed seemed to be faster than the golden assassin. He was so fast that his figure almost became a shadow in the crisscrossing golden light. The Daotong formula locked the balcony, was specially used to subdue Yin spirits. In the vast golden light, it would slow down the opponent's speed and shock their mind. Coupled with the Xuanye golden light spell of Kenzo, it complemented each other. No one should be able to escape from this killer move. But at this moment, Li Yunxin was not affected by the restriction. He dodged like the wind. In the blink of an eye, he could change his position more than 10 times. In the next breath, not a single sword light could hit him. While Li Yunxin was dodging, she sneered in a calm and unruffled voice, "Strong enough but not fast enough, my friend. With this kind of ability, how could he kill my parents fair and square? You are now in the transcendent state. You can turn illusions into reality, but it is still different from the real state. I guess your golden light spell can last. 3, 2, 1, you can't hold it anymore." As soon as he finished speaking, the golden light on the street suddenly disappeared. Darkness once again covered the battlefield. Li Yunxin closed his eyes for a while to get used to the darkness. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the beggar. Then he took out a papyrus drawing from his bosom and tore it apart. Guang Wang formation breaking painting. I am stronger and more agile than Guang Wang. But your sword light is not as sharp as the weapons of 100,000 soldiers. He smiled in the darkness. This is a painting. This painting was taught to me when I was 7 years old. Qing Lizhu no longer looked down on him. He realized that he had made a mistake. Li Yunxin was at the peak of the transcendent state, and he was at the peak of the transcendent state. Qing Lizhu used to be in the real state, but now he was at the peak of the transcendent state. If he was also a Taoist or a swordsman, he could easily kill him. But the problem was, he was a Taoist painting master. He had been tricked by him earlier and had given him an hour to prepare. A well-prepared Taoist painting master stayed on the street for 2 hours. Qing Lizhu knew what was going on with the dozens of streams of spiritual energy that passed through the restriction he set up. It was Li Yunxin's ambush. Because during those 2 hours, Li Yunxin was well prepared and quickly closed the gap between the two of them. He was not an ordinary Taoist painting master, and he was not one of those useless painters worshipped by the Heavenly Cave sect. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the skills of a real Taoist painting master at the peak of the transcendent state. When he fought with Li Chunfeng and his wife, it was their souls that had transformed into their real bodies and fled thousands of miles away. That was a battle of pure cultivation, and they didn't use any of the skills of a Taoist painting master. Now Qing Lizhu knew what Li Yunxin meant when he said fair and square. His mistake was to compete with this Taoist priest Dan Qin who was well prepared. What Li Yunxin had prepared were all life-saving methods. It was obvious that he cherished his body very much. That meant he was very fragile. He was also a swordsman who practiced dual cultivation. The body of an expert at the peak of the transcendent realm was stronger than that of an expert at the emptiness realm. He should have continued to fight with the techniques of the sword sect after his first attack was blocked by Li Yunxin. He shouldn't have retreated 3 steps. At this moment, Qing Lizhu heard Li Yunxin say in the darkness, "Since I've let you have 2 moves, it's my turn now. Don't cry when I beat you later." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yunxin pounced towards Qing Lizhu. Qing Lizhu laughed strangely and raised his sword to meet Li Yunxin. Good timing. At this moment, dark clouds covered the moon, and the long street was shrouded in darkness. However, darkness was not an obstacle for a powerful warrior. Airflow, sound, and temperature could all be used as guiding lights. When Qing Lizhu pounced, he had already written a talisman, a restriction 3 steps in front of him. If Li Yunxin pounced over, he would be entangled by this restriction for a while. Then he could. Suddenly, a faint golden light shone in front of him. With the help of this golden light, Qing Lizhu saw that Li Yunxin was actually ignoring the restriction 3 steps in front of him, and was charging straight towards him. And that faint light was the light of the restriction breaking one after another on his body. Qing Lizhu cursed inwardly, "What evil spirit did I do tonight? Why doesn't this Li Yunxin have the slightest bit of common sense?" But before he could think, Li Yunxin had already swung a barbaric fist. The fist was extremely powerful and heavy, heading straight for Qing Lizhu's face. With this strength, speed, and technique, even a peak expert of the secular world, a rare genius of the martial world, would be smashed into meat paste by this fist. But in Qing Lizhu's view, after tearing apart the Guangwang formation breaking diagram, Li Yunxin's speed was laughably slow. He even had the time to think of several countermeasures in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. But in the end, he decided to use the sword to directly meet the fist wind. Tonight, he had enough of this Li Yunxin's humiliation and contempt. And his strength was clearly far above his opponent's. This kid was getting carried away. So he had to teach him a good lesson and let him know that Qing Lizhu's Kenzo Daoist technique was. He slanted his sword upwards. Ow! Then the sword vibrated. Incomparably sharp. It went straight for Li Yunxin's fist wind. Bang! Half of Qing Lizhu's face was almost smashed, and his entire body was sent flying. That sword of his had indeed pierced forward with full force. It went straight for Li Yunxin's fist wind, stabbing out 32 times in an instant. Stabbing his knuckles, wrist, eyes, and 29 times at his heart. It only took a moment, and the sword was infused with the full strength of a peak transcendent cultivator. Although this beggar's body was temporarily strengthened by spiritual power, it was already strong enough. Therefore, the thing that Qing Lizhu didn't understand when he landed was, why didn't Li Yunxin die? The body of a ghost cultivator with the strength of an emptiness realm couldn't possibly withstand this kind of power. Although half of his head was smashed, he should have died. But after all, it was a possessed body controlled by a cultivator's soul. Qing Lizhu felt that this was his last fight, so he immediately jumped up from the ground, holding the broken sword and pouncing towards Li Yunxin. This time he didn't care about any tactics. Although being killed on the living body or knocked out of the body would consume his strength, Qing Lizhu now truly realized that if he didn't use all his strength to kill Li Yunxin tonight, there would be more trouble in the future. This kid is too strange. Not even once could he predict him. In the darkness of the long street, even more violent flames and fist wind burst out. After trembling intensely for 3 breaths, there was a short and uncontrollable scream. Bang! Qing Lizhu's body was hit to the ground again, and there was a bowl-sized bloody hole in his chest. The strong body, protected by the spiritual power of a cultivator at the peak of the transcendent realm, was actually pierced. The dark clouds that covered the moon finally dispersed. As for the dying child beggar, he finally understood why Li Yunxin was unscathed after being stabbed so many times by him, and why her body would even emit sparks when she was stabbed. Because the person standing in front of him was a being with the body of a devil. More than 10 feet tall. Ferocious red antlers on his head. Long hair as white as snow, like the mane of a male lion. His whole body was covered with black scales, and when he moved slightly, there was a sound of metal colliding. A pair of golden eyes had a thin black line, which was demonic and ferocious. A mouth full of sharp teeth like a beast slightly grinned, and breathed out clouds and mist, saying to him, "Do you know that I used the city of Wei as a scroll to reconstruct my Dharmakaya? The streets and alleys of the city of Wei are like my meridians. Now that you are fighting with me in the city of Wei, it is like you are fighting with me in my body. You don't use the good Taoist method, but you have to fight with me, haha. Tell me, do you have a right to die?" Chapter 148. The child beggar was lying on the ruined street. The blood flowing out of his chest formed a small pool. It was amazing that he had so much blood. However, he still raised his head and stared at Li Yunxin with his remaining eye. He spat out his words along with his blood. "I don't believe it. How is this possible? You are a human. You want to be a ghost cultivator even after you die. How could you become a demon?" Li Yunxin, who had revealed his Dharmakaya, bent down and lifted the child beggar in the air with one hand. The scales on his body clanked and made a long and clear sound under the moonlight. The devil god looked at the child beggar with his thin eyes. Hot steam gushed out of his mouth with every word he said. I know you have many questions. But I also have doubts. Since you are going to die soon, you don't want to be a muddle-headed ghost. Then you ask me one question and I'll ask you one question. I'll let you know why you are going to die. Is that okay? Even though he was in such a situation and was full of doubts and fear, he still sneered in his heart when he heard Li Yunxin's words. The child beggar's body would certainly die. But Qing Liangji would not die so easily. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said weakly with his last voice, Okay. I'm willing to die even if I have to find out the truth. Li Yunxin stared at him for a while with his thin eyes. Then he revealed a ferocious and mysterious smile. Then let me ask you, did you kill Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu with your own hands? No. Then it's your turn to ask. Li Yunxin looked at him. Go ahead. Why didn't the restriction 3 steps in front of me work on you? The child beggar spat out another mouthful of blood. It splashed on Li Yunxin's scales. But it quickly turned into steam. Dragon Sun laughed. You're about to die but you don't ask me anything. You just want to know why you were defeated by me. You'll never achieve anything great. But I can tell you. I am now Dragon Sun Qi-Wen, born with no karma with this world. Your Daotong prohibition spell works by using the power of heaven and earth. Since I have no karma with this world, of course I can break all spells. I'll give you another fact. That night, Dragon Sun's kiss broke Lu Ling's 3-step barrier in the same way. What do you mean? Aren't you Long's son? The beggar frowned. That's the next question, friend. Li Yunxin shook his head. Then let me ask you, if you didn't kill them with your own hands, how do you know they're dead? I heavily injured them and then the divine monarch attacked. If you're 1,000 miles away, you'll die in one strike. When the beggar said this, he revealed a carefree smile. However, Li Yunxin was not angered. He only shook his head slightly. You really like to play tricks. Guess who the divine monarch is next? But it doesn't matter. I have enough secrets. The beggar snorted vaguely and spat out more blood. Fine. Then I won't ask you why there was a Dragon Sun before, or how you became Dragon Sun. I only ask you, if you're really Li Yunxin, what are you planning to do by hiding in Weiqing City? Do you dare to tell me? Why wouldn't I dare? Li Yunxin laughed. His laughter sounded like metal rubbing against metal. The hot steam he spat out made the beggar's blood-stained messy hair dry quickly. Slowly, blisters appeared on half of his face. I'm Dragon Sun now, Wei River Dragon King. My plan is, of course, to be a dignified Dragon King, and to make all of you eyesores scram out of my territory. What a big tone. The beggar seemed to be getting weaker and weaker. Before Li Yunxin could ask, he said, That divine monarch is a great divinity of our Freemasonry. He's extremely powerful. You want to ask me who he is? I've never seen him before. Let me ask you again, do you dare to tell me in detail how you're related to the dragon cult? Li Yunxin smiled and threw the beggar's body to the ground. The body had lost too much blood and was long dead. It was because Qing Liang's soul refused to leave and was hanging on. Now the corpse lay on the ground in a sorry state. It stared at Li Yunxin with its only turbid eye and hissed, Do you dare to tell me in detail? Li Yunxin looked at him with pity in her eyes. She walked to his side and stood still. Okay. Fine, I'll tell you in detail. Right now, there are actually 3 factions near the Wei River. You and Yunzi are on one side. Lord Dongting in Dongting Lake is on the other side. Bai Yunxin is on the other side. Yunzi wants to avenge Ling Kongzi, or he knows that Lu Ling isn't dead and is in Lord Dongting's hands. However, he's a cultivator and is a natural enemy of demons. He also knows that Lu Ling died in Bai Yunxin's hands. Therefore, Yu Yunzi hoped that the 2 fiendish demons would die. However, they're 2 great demons. If I were a smart person like Yunzi, I'd try to let the 2 demons fight and cause both sides to suffer, then I'd benefit from it. Lord Dongting wants to avenge Dragon Sun. I let Lord Dongting believe that Lu Ling and Bai Yunxin joined hands to kill Dragon Sun. He may not believe it, but it doesn't matter. He'll definitely hate Daotong and want Daotong's people to die. But Lord Dongting is also a smart person. He knows that it's too risky for him to do this, so he'll try to let Daotong and Bai Yunxin fight and cause both sides to suffer, then he'll benefit from it, so it doesn't matter whether he believes it or not. As for Bai Yunxin, if I'm not wrong, she only wants the feather coat. She wants to take it back from Lord Dongting. Of course, it was Daotong's people who took her feather coat, so both Lord Dongting and Daotong have reasons to believe that Bai Yunxin wants Daotong's people to die. But in my opinion, she doesn't care about that. Well, now you know. From Yunzi and Lord Dongting's point of view, The three forces near Wei River all want the other two forces to die, and they all want to see the other two forces fight to the death. At the same time, they all know that the other two forces will never cooperate with each other sincerely. Speaking of this, Li Yunxin lowered his head to look at the beggar and laughed. Oh, look at your expression, I'm right. That Yunzi really thinks so. Then the next thing is easy to do. Because the other three won't expect. There's a fourth force. It's me. I didn't die and I've become stronger. Lord Dongting and Yunzi are carefully waiting for each other to make the first move, to see if there's any flaw. That won't do. One is a 3,000-year-old demon, and the other is a perfected person who meditates for days without moving. I don't have the patience to be a coward for a long time. To be honest, Lord Dongting and Yunzi are both smart, and what they do is reasonable. The only one who doesn't make sense is me. It's not their fault for being stupid, it's because this world is too strange. So, I created the dragon cult. On one hand, I absorbed the power of wish from the believers and slowly became stronger. On the other hand, haha, this is interesting. Of course Yunzi will think, oh my god, this dragon cult is developing so fast and it's using the name of Dragon Sun, there must be someone supporting it, it must be Lord Dongting. Now, when you tell Yunzi what I said before, he will be even more certain. Oh, it's really Lord Dongting and Bai Yunxing's doing. But the power of wish from so many believers has to go somewhere. Lord Dongting and Bai Yunxing are both demons and they want the power of wish, so there will be internal strife. So Yunzi will think, haha, I'll wait until this dragon cult is really powerful, and the power of wish can't be ignored anymore, then I'll watch you two tigers fight. Then Lord Dongting will think the same. He will think that this dragon cult is definitely Daotong and Bai Yunxing's doing. Daotong can't absorb the power of wish, so it will only benefit Bai Yunxing. Once that Bai Yunxing becomes stronger, how can Daotong sit still? They will also have internal strife. They are quite right in thinking so. And these days I've been running back and forth. It's to deepen their impression and strengthen their beliefs. As for Bai Yunxing, I'm also not worried about her. But I'm not going to tell you why. So, in this way they'll be wary of each other, and remember, they'll just watch as the dragon cult grows stronger. And they'll feel that things are developing more and more in the direction they've predicted. Haha, this group of idiots. But they don't know that the power of wish has been used by me. Li Yunxing grinned hideously, lowering his head to look at the beggar. Do you think my plan is brilliant? The beggar's breath was very weak, and Li Yunxing had to pay close attention to hear him. Your plan is brilliant. But it's not foolproof. You have too many people to rely on, and not everyone can do things according to your plan. Once something goes wrong. You're smart, kid. But you're not experienced enough. The beggar's breath became weaker, but his tone became more cheerful. But you can think of such a plan. You're quite smart. If given more time and more training, perhaps you can really become our opponent. But, cough cough, hee, you little brat got carried away and told me all the secrets. Have you ever thought about what would happen to you if you couldn't restrain me, and I escaped? Let me ask you again. The beggar's eyes shone with even more pride. If you, noisy. Li Yunxin suddenly stretched out his fist, interrupting the beggar's words without warning, and punched him. With a loud bang, the ground of the street trembled violently. The buildings on both sides were already damaged in the fight, and were on the verge of collapse. At this point, if they were to withstand such a force, they would all fall down with a crash. And the beggar's corpse disappeared after this punch. Instead, it turned into a bloody paste that covered almost half of the street. When the dust settled, Li Yunxin straightened his back. Right now he was standing in a huge deep pit. There were cobweb-like cracks in the pit, but the strange thing was that the pit was clean without a trace of blood. This was because the violent shock wave and high temperature generated by the friction between the huge force and the ground had already swept away all the debris in the pit. He let out a long breath and seemed to be talking to himself. No wonder Lu Ling killed people like that. It was really cool. When cultivators and demons fought, no one would think that it was over as long as the opponent's body was destroyed. Because if the body was destroyed, there was still the soul. And for a strange person like Qing Liangzi, his soul was even more different. In fact, he was already similar to a ghost cultivator. Now, Qing Liangzi showed his real body, which was short and glowed in the dark. He looked at Li Yunxin angrily. Why did you suddenly kill me? I said that I would blow you into pieces fair and square. Li Yunxin looked at him calmly. Did you forget? Or did you think that I would wait for you to proudly talk about your point of view, then use your laughable and shallow knowledge to infer my plan, and finally wait for you to have enough fun, before I could kill you? Oh, I just don't want you to be so happy. Qing Liangzi pointed at him angrily and then laughed angrily again. Good, hee hee. Good, do you think that after you destroy my body I will be at your mercy? Arrogant boy, I was tricking you just now. I was waiting for you to proudly talk about your plan, and then I would get rid of that body and show my real body. Now, I am going to run 1,000 miles away and tell Yunzi everything you said just now. Hee, let's see how you regret it. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Yunxin punched out. However, the punch that had smashed the child beggar's body into a bloody paste just now passed through Qing Liangzi's body, as if it was just an illusion. Qing Liangzi laughed wildly. This punch of yours can destroy souls and ghost cultivators, but it can't destroy me. Do you know that I am an emissary of hell? Li Yunxin yawned and stood 2 steps away from Qing Liangzi, looking at him calmly. You are a non-staff member of Dark Azura Temple. Not a ghost, not a ghost, not a ghost cultivator. Ordinary Taoist arts can't harm your soul, because you are part of Hell's establishment and you can be considered a god. What else? Tell me. Qing Liangzi was stunned for a moment. How do you know about this? Li Yunxin shrugged and then continued in a resolute voice. There is one more thing. You and I both know that physical pain is meaningless to cultivators. Who hasn't suffered unbearable pain during their cultivation? Physical pain isn't pain, but the pain in the depths of the soul is the most painful. When I said I was going to blast you into dregs, the specific process was actually like this. First, I would blast your body into dregs, then I would blast your self-confidence and self-esteem into dregs, and then I would blast this, whether it be your spirit or soul, into dregs. This way I would blast you into dregs. So you thought that you had tricked me into saying so much just now. In fact, even if you didn't ask me, I would have told you all the same. Bit by bit, I would have told you all of my plans. This way you would be pleased with yourself and think that you have succeeded. After being pleased with yourself, you would want to go back and tell my plan to Yunzi. At that time you guys would kill me with lightning speed and I would definitely, you mean, too late for regrets, right? The corner of Li Yunxin's mouth slowly curled up, revealing a dangerous yet joyful smile. Tell me, when you think about it, I will shatter your fantasy. I will let you keep thinking in your heart at the last moment. If only I could leave earlier and not listen to him, how good would it be to send all these words back? How happy would it be? Hearing his words, Qing Liangzi had a bad feeling in his heart. He turned around and flew away. However, at this moment, an iron chain shot out from Li Yunxin's palm like lightning. Catch! With a clattering sound, Qing Liangzi's soul, which couldn't even touch spiritual power and demonic power, was locked by the neck by this iron chain. Following that, the iron chain tightened again. Qing Liangzi, just like the countless wandering ghosts that had been chained by the iron chain, was gently pulled to the front of Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin lowered his head and smiled at Qing Liangzi, who was chained and unable to move. Friend, you are an emissary of hell. But I am a judge of the Yang realm. What a delightful coincidence and timing, isn't it? As he spoke, he used his other hand to pull out a thin booklet hidden under his scale armor and flipped it open. Look, it says here, that this iron chain can bind souls, but it can't bind the soul of a Taoist. You're only at the peak of the transcendent realm right now. It says again about the hierarchy of the Sinluo Temple. Let me take a look at you, emissary of hell. You have to use the true fire of the ninth heaven to strike 49 times in order to destroy it? But it also says that killing an emissary of hell without authorization is a grave sin, and will result in the death of the king of hell. Li Yunxin furrowed his brows and looked at Qing Liangzi, who couldn't speak. He pondered seriously for a while and then suddenly chuckled. I'm just teasing you, friend. What's there to think about? I've never believed in coincidences. For example, why did you make me a judge of the Yang realm just a few days ago and give me this thin booklet and chain? Why did it just happen to let me understand what kind of thing you are? So, let's do the last step now. Li Yunxin retracted his smile and looked at Qing Liangzi calmly. Blast you into pieces. Chapter 149. Qing Liangzhu's soul couldn't speak, but his eyes were filled with fear and madness. No one was more afraid of death than him, especially when he firmly believed that he would never really die, and there was no option of death in his mind. How could Li Yunxin dare to kill him? Was he going to be hunted down by the infernal king? How could he be a judge of the Yang world? There were no more than 2 known judges of the Yang world in this world. But before he could really think clearly about these things, Li Yunxin had already solemnly taken 3 steps back. Then, his scales opened up. The dozen or so jars of wine that he had drunk into his body not long ago had turned into a thick mist, rising from beneath his scales. At first it was a wisp, but soon it became a cloud that lingered around him. Then the clouds gathered into clouds and began to roll slowly. At the same time the moonlight was blocked. Qing Liangzhu looked up and saw thick dark clouds in the sky. The mist around Li Yunxin tumbled, and the dark clouds tumbled along with it. But the momentum was greater and the rolling was more violent. After a quarter of an hour, the whole sky above the city of Wei was covered by thick clouds. Lightning lit up in the dark clouds. Qing Liangzhu heard the sound of rolling thunder, then came the dazzling light. Even though he was confused, panicked, and couldn't believe it, he was screaming in his heart, how dare he? But that was indeed his last memory. The scales of Li Yunxin, wrapped in clouds and mist, suddenly opened and closed, and the lightning in the clouds above the city of Wei became more and more intense. Streaks of lightning entangled with one another, and finally converged into a thick bolt of lightning. Flash. Boom. A bright line connecting heaven and earth hit the soul that was chained by the iron chain. There was no resistance and there was no strange phenomenon. The ninth heaven thunder fire, which was formed by 49 lightning bolts in the clouds, completely shattered Qing Liangzhu's soul in an instant. Smashed to pieces. After this blow, Li Yunxin took a deep breath. As a result, the clouds surrounding him were all sucked into his chest. The rain clouds that had gathered in the sky above the city of Wei and were about to pour down disappeared in an instant, and a bright moon reappeared. Li Yunxin stood still and stared at the place where Qing Liangzhu had been killed for a while before letting out a low sigh. Then, his body suddenly shrank and turned back into his human form and clothes. After glancing at the direction where the pill cauldron of prime clarity was stationed, he turned around and disappeared into the alley. He walked through the streets and alleys for nearly half an hour before people finally poked their heads out of their houses to see what was going on outside. Qing Liangzi sealed off the streets, while Li Yunxin cast a spell to drive away the nearby residents. Nothing alarmed the people in the city of Wei, except for the sudden thick clouds, strong wind, and lightning. The last time such a phenomenon appeared in the sky above the city of Wei, it brought about a catastrophe. This time, everyone panicked again. However, after coming to the street and worrying for a while, they did not hear any loud noises or smoke again, so someone said that perhaps it was really just a sudden storm. At this time, Li Yunxin had already arrived at the south of the city. The south of the city was where the merchants and nobles of Wei lived, so there was no panic at this moment. Some servants of the big families were armed and went to the street to investigate. After confirming that nothing was wrong, they slowly returned to their mansions. Li Yunxin walked along the tall wall of a family for a while, and then stopped in the moonlight. His shadow was elongated. He turned around and realized that the White Yama King was standing in his shadow. I thought there would be a good show. How could you just kill him like that? The White Hell Lord was unhurried as he said softly, You actually dared to kill my messenger of death. How audacious of you. Li Yunxin smiled warmly, and the hostility he had when he killed Qing Liangzhu was gone. I gradually found that you are also a humorous person. This feeling is not bad. I suddenly felt bored just now. What else should I do? Listen to him beg for mercy? I can't believe what he said. And I was worried that Yunzi would come, but then again, who on earth is asking you to help me? Bai Yanjun widened his slender eyes. Help you? That Qing Liangzhu said that there are only 10 known judges of the Yang world in this world, and you happened to give me this booklet and the iron chain a few days ago so I can deal with him today. Don't say it was unintentional. Bai Yanjun smiled. You little kid, you think too much. It was indeed not unintentional. But I said I wanted to help you, haha, it was not really helping you. I just wanted to provide some convenience for you and see how far you can go. If you do well, I will help you again, but if you can't, then it's all gone. There is no shortage of amazing people in this world. Li Yunxin walked on the street, stepping on his own shadow step by step. He lowered his head and walked a few steps as if he was playing. Suddenly he stopped and looked up to ask Yanjun, Is it the art sage? Is he still alive? Is he helping me? Oh, you mean the art sage, one of the 3 sages? Bai Yanjun curled his lips and gloated, That scourge died long ago. You don't need to ask me, I'll ask you. You're really interesting, you really can shed tears. Let me ask you, you previously made a painting called The Overlord's Armor. I know it's real. After that, you said that you used the Guang Wang formation breaking painting to avoid his Xuanya golden light? Bai Yanjun suddenly appeared in front of Li Yunxin and squinted at him. I know that there is no Guang Wang formation breaking painting at all. You only had time to make the armor. Tell me, what did you rely on to dodge that Shenyi golden light technique? Your spirit is now your Dharmakaya, and the golden light is very powerful. Even if it hit you once, it would take half of your life. Li Yunxin took a step back and frowned. You can see that too? Bai Yanjun laughed. I can also see that you tore those paintings to bluff. What kind of precious scroll can you make with that kind of toilet paper? You used it for a while and then it became useless. You might as well tear it up and throw it away and then coax that fool into thinking that you have a lot of treasures, and that he should fight you with his hands. Haha, you said that it was fair and square, but it was still a trick. I can see that your parents, well, haha, you can also use them. Hearing Bai Yanjun's words, Li Yunxin suddenly laughed. When I said that when I dodged the Xuanya golden light, nothing was useless. It was me who dodged it. Do you believe me? Bai Yanjun sneered. You really know how to joke. People like you would not take that kind of risk. If you didn't dodge it once and I didn't save you, you would really die. So Li Yunxin shrugged, walked around him and continued to walk forward. After a dozen steps, Bai Yanjun appeared next to him again. He stared with his eyes wide open. What? You lunatic, did you really dodge by yourself at that time? You also know that I am crazy, Li Yunxin said calmly. How can a crazy person not be crazy? Bai Yanjun stared at him in surprise. If I hit you, I will die. Li Yunxin seemed to have heard something funny. He turned his head to look at Bai Yanjun while walking. There is no perfect plan in this world, don't you know? Actually, I'm always taking a risk when I plan something. When I deceive people, I do it according to human nature. I think that person is most likely to do so and so. If I meet someone like myself who doesn't follow the rules, I will fail. So, why are you surprised that I am taking risks now? I am a crazy person. Li Yunxin said sincerely. Crazy people don't like to follow the rules, even if it is their own rules. You said that people who never take risks and don't harm people without confidence are not crazy, they are perverts. He walked a few more steps and said in a low voice, and I do like them. That's fair and above board. You want to kill people, you won't understand. Bai Yanjun didn't say anything. He just floated in front of him and stared at him carefully. After a while he said, Oh, you also don't understand. Seeing that Li Yunxin was still walking quickly along the street, he asked again, Who are you going to plot against this time? Li Yunxin shrugged, I will understand sooner or later. As for now, I want to go to the Yu family. The fight just now can't be in vain. This is a good opportunity and I suddenly thought of a good plan. And I have a question. Li Yunxin looked at Bai Yanjun with interest. Are you a woman? You are very gossipy and interested in me. Li Yunxin frowned mischievously. Are you in love with me? Bai Yanjun followed for a while and suddenly opened his eyes wide. He laughed crazily. Ha ha, you little boy, ha ha, how could I, ha ha. And then he disappeared in a flash. Mental illness. Li Yunxin curled his lips and suddenly turned left. He went straight through the blackwood gate of a mansion and entered the yard. This was a real mansion. He was now standing behind the front door of the mansion. The gatekeeper didn't see him, because he had hidden himself. The Yu family. Li Yunxin still remembered the young man who woke him and Lu Laodao from the roadside and sent them to the city of Wei. His name was Yu Meng, one of the richest young masters in the city of Wei. At that time his impression of him was warm-hearted, but he was stupid. All the young talents in the city liked this good-tempered, rich and stupid young master. Li Yunxin had no reason not to like him. He came to find him after not seeing him for a long time. But the Yu family was too big. He spent an hour to figure out the layout of the family. Then he found the yard where Yu Meng lived. His family didn't mistreat this stupid son. He was the head of the escort agency after all. It was a courtyard with 3 entrances. Flowers and trees formed a forest. The shadows were sparse and the fragrance was floating. Li Yunxin was a little surprised. He thought that Yu Meng would prefer a simple and grand style. But he still went through the hall, ignoring the servants and maids who were sleeping outside. He went straight into the inner room where Yu Meng lived. Yu Meng was sleeping soundly. He was alone on the bed with a brocade quilt in his arms. He wore a pair of silk shorts under the hot weather. It was also a pair of satin shorts, which glowed like water under the moonlight. He was sleeping with his head tilted and one arm hanging by the side of the bed. Only his breathing could be heard in the quiet room. Li Yunxin appeared and waved his hand to isolate the sound in the room. Then he leaned over and patted his face. Hey! He thought he had to use more strength. Who knew that Yu Meng would wake up with a start? He grabbed the porcelain pillow at the head of the bed and smashed it on the ground. But he just woke up. The porcelain pillow brushed past Li Yunxin and hit something on the ground, making a series of crashing sounds. This time Yu Meng really woke up. He sat up from the bed and looked dizzily. He saw a young man dressed in white, covered in blood, standing by his bed, staring at him with his head lowered. Yu Meng was stunned. He didn't move or make a sound. The moonlight flowed on the ground. After a while, something in the corner of the room seemed to have been destroyed. It finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground. This voice made Yu Ming feel like he was still in the world. So he asked in a low voice, "Ah, are you a ghost?" Li Yunxin laughed in her heart. Sure enough, none of the people he liked were boring. He took a step back with a straight face and bowed to Yu Ming. "Benefactor, do you still remember me?" Yu Ming didn't know if it was because he was born stupid or because he felt that the voice was kind, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He carefully looked at Li Yunxin for a while under the moonlight and suddenly realized, "Oh, you are the accountant who died of illness in my village." Li Yunxin shook his head. 2 months ago, Benefactor saw a Taoist priest, a young man and a fainted escort in the forest outside the city. So I saved them and brought them back to the city. Yu Ming blinked and thought for a while. He slapped the quilt hard. "Oh, I don't remember." Li Yunxin sighed. "Benefactor, just listen to me. You saved Qiao Duanhong, the head escort of Qiao's Hongfu escort agency, Taoist Lu, the temple attendant of the Dragon King Temple in Weiqing, and I, Li Yunxin. Benefactor, you can ask around and you will remember." "Ah." Yu Ming interrupted him. "Oh? Since I saved them, how did they become ghosts?" Without waiting for Li Yunxin to answer, he blinked again and suddenly stood on the ground with bare feet. They must have been killed by someone. He walked around Li Yunxin and suddenly sighed. "All right. Brother Li was killed by a scoundrel and the first thing you thought of is to find me. Since you trust me so much, as the head of the escort agency of the Daqing state, I will not disappoint you. Just tell me, what are your grievances?" Yu Ming's behavior was silly in the eyes of the childs in the city of Wei, warm-hearted in the eyes of the real Jianghu heroes. But in the eyes of Li Yunxin, it was something he had expected. He still remembered the first time he met him. This dragon head, you could figure out the whole thing in his mind within a quarter of an hour? The escort agency was attacked by a beast. Li Yunxin liked his kindness but not his intelligence. So he didn't want to deal with this child Yu. But now, this characteristic of Yu Ming could be used by him. There was no one more suitable than him in the city of Wei. He bowed again and said, "Benefactor, please listen to me. After I was saved by you, I lived in the Dragon King Temple. Later there was a fight between demons and monsters. The statue of the Dragon King Temple was destroyed. The temple attendant and I were killed. After that, the Dragon King was angry with me and the temple attendant for not taking care of the temple well. He ordered General Crab to capture me and Lao Dao and bring us to the Dragon Palace. We were tortured every day. I have endured for many days, but tonight I finally sneaked out while that shrimp soldier was sleeping. The Dragon King was furious and ordered the Dragon Prince of the Vast Sea to catch me. Did you hear the thunder just now?" Yu Ming listened to him with a frown. When he mentioned the thunder, he suddenly understood. The thunder was the Dragon Prince of the Vast Sea coming to catch you? "I heard it just now. The thunder monster woke me up. It took me another quarter of an hour to fall asleep. Now the Dragon Prince is on his way." Li Yunxin cupped his hands and said, "Please save me, benefactor." Yu Ming hurriedly looked out of the window. Ignoring his scary bloody clothes, he immediately said, "How can I save you? Go to the dragon cult to save me? Have you ever heard of the dragon cult?" Yu Ming frowned. "Huh? I have never heard of it." But Li Yunxin looked out of the window and became more and more panicked. "When the Dragon Prince hit me with the thunder, he destroyed a lot of houses on the street. If benefactor can repair those houses in the name of the dragon cult, oh, the dragon cult worships the Dragon Prince of the Vast Sea, the Dragon King will definitely..." Speaking of this, Li Yunxin suddenly shouted, "Ah, here it comes." He waved his sleeve and knocked Yu Ming to the ground. It had been almost an hour since he killed Qing Liangzi. Li Yunxin looked at the moonlight outside the window. He waved his hand and put Yu Ming back on the bed. Then he kicked hard on the ground, removed the inhibition spell, and went through the wall like a gust of wind. Chapter 150. The last sound woke Yu Ming up again, a few seconds after he was knocked out. The young dragon head of the escort agency suddenly sat up on the bed and raised his head to look at the bedside. But there was no one there, only moonlight. He stared blankly at the moonlight for a while and shouted, "Guards! Guards! Su! Lily!" His voice woke up the maids sleeping in the outer room. 2 14 or 15-year-old girls hurriedly put on their clothes and walked in with candlesticks in their hands. But as soon as they came in, they screamed. The floor beside the door was a mess. The antique shelf was toppled and the bracelet they made for their master in the afternoon was broken. The broken pieces were scattered all over the floor, including their master's porcelain pillow. The two maids, Wuxia and Lily, immediately ran to Yu Ming with candlesticks in their hands. They placed the candlesticks on the table and pulled him back. One of them carefully searched in front of him while the other carefully searched behind him. Yu Ming was so anxious that she kept stomping her feet. She wanted them to move away so that she could look at the broken pieces on the floor. However, the two young maidservants were impatient. They pressed Yu Ming down on the bed and kept asking, "Is Ming Ming all right? Are you hurt anywhere? There is no law in the city of Wei. How could the Yu family be robbed? This is the inner court. Hurry up and call for help. What are you waiting for? I want to look after him. You should go." Yu Ming was anxious and waved his hands. "No, no, 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 don't call for help. I smashed it. Don't call for help." Wuxia and Lily were stunned and stopped arguing. Two small hands touched Yu Ming's forehead and tears welled up in her eyes. "Ming Ming, are you shocked?" Yu Ming was annoyed and stood up with all his strength and jumped to the table. "Stop, stop. Let me tell you, someone came to me in my dream." As he spoke, he used the candlelight to look at the mess on the floor. His eyes lit up. "It's true. I remember in my dream that I lost a pillow. Oh, it's so real." Then he turned to Wuxia and Lily. "Let me tell you, I was in my dream just now." While he was saying this, the two girls looked at him tenderly, trying to guess whether he was frightened or having a nightmare, and tried to coax him to listen. But as he listened, he felt that something was amiss. Wuxia got up and walked to Yu Ming's back. She wiped her hand on Yu Ming's bare back and was stunned. Yes, the Yu family was a wealthy family. The inner room was made of terrazzo, and there was an earth dragon underneath. It's cool in summer and warm in winter. However, there was no rule of removing shoes after entering the house, and there was muddy ground outside the courtyard, so it was hard to guarantee that there would be some dirt and dust on the ground. The steadier and more attentive Wuxia felt a little bit of mud on Ming's back. Yu Ming wiped her hand on her back and laughed. Look, I'm not talking nonsense. I remember it was in a dream." "Ming Ming, you remember that you saw that person and fell asleep again?" Wuxia thought for a while and looked at his hand worriedly. "What if it's true? For example, it wasn't a ghost but someone who bewitched you, and then bewitched us." The figure outside the window heard her words and smiled. He didn't expect Yu Ming to have such a careful and cautious little girl by his side. However, planning was never going to go smoothly. He had already planted a seed, whether it would germinate or not depended on it. So when Lily whispered in the room, "I've heard of the dragon cult, but repairing houses is also a good thing," Li Yunxin floated away. At this time Yunzi floated over, to the place where Qing Liangzhu was killed. Not many people came. No one was willing to go within 100 steps of this street. Because the lesson from last time was still fresh in their minds, there was a strange phenomenon on Taoshi Road. A group of people ran to make money from the dead, but in the end, one of them was killed by the demon. And that Yamen runner didn't dare to go. The last time on Taoshi Road, the Yamen runner from Liuhe Prefecture was cut in half by the demon because he went too fast. So on this long street, he was the only one. Yunzi stood by the pit with his hands behind his back. He closed his eyes slightly on the bloody paste of the beggar's body. He was trying to reconstruct what happened here through the various traces at the scene. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. Was it that old thing or Bai Yunshin who did it? Right now there were only two people who could kill Qing Liangzhu near Wei River. Qing Liangzhu, Ayin Messenger, a perfected spiritual master, and the peak of the transformative realm. With such foresight and knowledge, who could kill him like that? That old thing couldn't have stepped more than 10 feet away from Dong Ting. It probably wasn't him. If it was Bai Yunshin, then what about the Nine Heavens Thunderfire? After thinking about it for a quarter of an hour, Yunzi suddenly opened his eyes. He sucked in a breath of cold air. He thought of a terrifying possibility. Compared to this possibility, he hoped that it was indeed that old thing and Bai Yunshin who did it. A breath later, Yunzi flew out of this long street. 3 breaths later, Yunzi returned to the Shangqing Danding sect's residence and took out a talisman from his sleeve. It was still late at night and the moon was shining brightly. Yunzi waved his sleeve and extinguished the candle on the table. Then, the talisman in his hand glowed with a faint golden light. He was thinking about whether to use this talisman or not. Daotong and Kenzo had residences in almost every city in the mortal world, and cultivators were stationed in each of those residences. Although their cultivation level might be low, and although the major sects and grotto heavens were not in harmony, they were still of the same branch. If he used this talisman now, the news would be sent back to Langya Grotto Heaven in a few days. Someone would come. But Yunzi hesitated for a while and finally put down the talisman. The worrisome possibility he thought of was, another Dragon Son had arrived in Wei City. When Ling Kongzi wanted to kill Dragon Son, there were some objections in the Grotto Heaven, but it wasn't strong. because the high-level cultivators knew some secrets among the big demons. For example, although the ninth young master was a rare powerful demon in the world, he was the weakest among the 9 dragon son. The dragon god didn't seem to like this ninth son and only gave him Wei River, which was taken over by other demons. Therefore, if they really wanted to kill him, they could. There was a consensus among Daotong and Kenzo. That was, humans and demons would have a battle eventually. The only worry was that Dragon Son's brothers might avenge him. But the possibility of this happening was too small. First, demons were cruel and cunning. Even among brothers there wasn't much friendship, not to mention the 9 sons who were different in temperament, background, and strength. In the mortal world, the emperor's family had no family ties, especially the demon's family. Second, even if one of them was on good terms with Dragon Son, or planned to take his Wei River, they wouldn't be able to reach here. When Shinryu appeared, it subdued all the big demons in the world and then gave 7 parts of the world to the 9 sons. But the problem was, it was 7 parts of the world, not 7 parts of the world. Other than rivers, lakes, and seas, there were mountains, forests, valleys, deserts, and grasslands. In those places there were many powerful demons, so powerful that even the dragon god didn't want to fight against them, and only wanted them to submit to him. The reason why the 9th young master could still keep the Wei River and the city of Wei was that it was far away from the other dragon sons, and there were powerful demons there. And now that Shinryu hadn't appeared in the world for a long time, the powerful demons that had submitted to it were ready to make trouble. Without the dragon god's protection, the 9 dragon sons were just demons. How could they occupy 7 parts of the world? Even if it was only in name. Because of this, the elders of the cave thought that killing the 9 dragon sons could test the demon's attitude, and also kill a powerful demon that might grow up. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But now, Yunzi felt that he wasn't so sure. Because of the 9 heavens true thunder fire. The 9 heavens true thunder fire referred to the powerful thunder that was triggered by the collision of yin and yang in the world. Among the demons, only the dragons had this kind of skill. Speaking of cultivators, some high-level cultivators also knew this kind of trick, but it wasn't true thunder fire. Lightning was generated from the palm of the hand and struck down from the sky. Even if the momentum was vast and powerful, it didn't have the slightest divine vitality of the true thunder fire of the 9th heaven. In the past 1,000 years, the cultivators had tried to solve this problem. The dragons could gather the clouds to produce thunder, and the cultivators could do it too. However, the same thunder, if made by humans, was not the true fire. It seemed that the dragons used this trick because there was a strange and mysterious reason. Qing Liangzi was killed by this true fire. Naturally, there were other ways to kill him, but it would take a lot of effort, and the person's cultivation was extremely high. Therefore, Yunzi became confused in this kind of doubt. He didn't know if he should alert the sect. The 9 dragon son Shiwen was the weakest among the 9. In the eyes of Shinryu and the other 8, he was unreasonably weak. He was only at the peak of the transcendent stage. And among the other 8, 6 were at the level of Taoist master, and 2 were already in the mysterious stage 1,000 years ago. However, this kind of analysis was only measured by the cultivator's marks. Almost no one could really experience how strong the demon's body was in the true stage or the mysterious stage. Yunzi didn't think that once he had a conflict with the dragon son, he would definitely lose. But the problem was, a person in the secular world would spend several months or even several years meticulously sculpting an external object. Once it was destroyed, he would be so heartbroken that he would stamp his feet and beat his chest. Cultivators spent decades or even centuries tempering their bodies and souls in order to achieve immortality. How could they not cherish their own treasures? It was true that the high-level cultivators didn't care much about the low-level cultivators. However, if the cultivators whose cultivation bases were not far from each other were to fight with each other as mortals had imagined, it would only take a few decades for all the cultivators in this world to die off. How could there be any inheritances that could last for thousands of years? Therefore, Yunzi sat alone in the inner room for half an hour. But in the end he put away the talisman. There's something strange about this. The enlightened Taoist master gently stroked his soft long beard. Strange. The night was silent. On the second day, the street that was destroyed in the fight was busy. The young master of the Yu family, Yu Meng, the head of the Daqing State's Escort Association, offered money and manpower to rebuild this street. Such a good thing naturally made people worried. Many shop owners on the street ran to find out what was going on. Yu Meng settled down in a tea house on this street that wasn't seriously affected. More than 10 servants with short sticks stood outside the door. The inside of the house was empty. They added a soft rattan chair and a few small tables. Snacks and tea were placed on the table, and there was a bucket of melons and fruits frozen in crushed ice on the ground. In Wuxia's hand was a beautiful long sword decorated with gold and jade, and in Lily's hand was a small incense burner. Yu Ming squinted his eyes and lay on the soft rattan chair to catch up on last night's sleep, holding a bamboo fan in his hand. The shop owners on the street came, but when they saw this scene outside the big window, they couldn't help but feel weak. They originally whispered to each other to ask young Master Yu what his plan was, but now they didn't dare to make a sound and just stood outside the tea house. The tall servants outside the door didn't care about them either. After several breaths of time, Lily placed the small incense burner on the table and gracefully walked to the door. In a soft voice she asked, "Is there something I can help you with? Which family's money and what didn't work?" After a while, a beardless shopkeeper came out. He looked around the room and said, "Miss Lily, we haven't touched the money and wood yet. It's not that we don't owe young Master Yu a favor, but we don't deserve a reward without doing anything. The repair costs of our shops are not small. Now that young Master Yu has sent us such a good thing, it's equivalent to saving the lives of many of us. We think about it, but we can't repay him, so we feel uneasy." Lily suddenly interrupted him. "How should I address you, elder?" The shopkeeper hurriedly said, "I don't dare to call myself elder. I'm the shopkeeper of Moonenju's Shaohun Street, Shi Kuanyong." Lily laughed. "Shopkeeper Shi? How do you recognize me?" When shopkeeper Shi saw her smile, his face also revealed a trace of a smile. "Last winter there was a time when I went back to the residence and ordered a banquet in the main store. At that time I was the head chef of the main store, so I accompanied the banquet. I was fortunate enough to meet young Master Yu, and I was fortunate enough to meet you. Shopkeeper Shi is only in charge of one branch, so you're a smart person. Does Shopkeeper Shi remember how much the banquet last winter was worth?" Shopkeeper Shi frowned slightly and thought for a moment, then said, "Last winter, because the main store received a rare white deer, we held a white deer banquet to celebrate the New Year's Eve. If I remember correctly." He paused. "It was worth 500 taels of silver. If Li Yunxin was here, he would know that according to the purchasing power of this world and his world, 500 taels of silver was worth 1 million. The crowd behind Shopkeeper Shi was in an uproar. Everyone knew that the Yu family was a wealthy family in the Daqing state, but a New Year's Eve dinner, 1 million taels of silver, had already exceeded the limits of anyone's imagination. What kind of riches and honor was this? After the uproar died down, Lily smiled indifferently. "Then Shopkeeper Shi, do you know what happened to that banquet?" Chapter 151. Shi Kuanyong seemed to have understood Miss Lily's intentions. But he glanced at the still sleeping Yu Ming through the window and said, After the food was tested, I returned to the main store. I really don't know. But, did you enjoy it?" Lily smiled faintly and said unhurriedly, "That night, Master had a taste at the main seat first. Ben said that the taste was quite delicious and praised Southwood House. But who would have thought that a bad thing would happen? A guest told Master that the deer meat was warm, but since it was a white deer and it was caught in the winter, it became cold. My master was worried that my master's body couldn't stand the cold, so he removed the table and gave us servants a reunion meal. Although Master had good intentions, it was freezing cold at that time. By the time the table was delivered, it was already cold. How could we eat it? We also like to eat light food, so we each tasted a few bites and didn't disappoint Master's good intentions, so we dispersed." At this time, the quick-witted people mostly knew what Miss Lily was going to say. Only a few silly people were still exclaiming, "God, it's the Yu family after all." They rewarded servants with a 500 taels meal. Lily waited for them to finish sighing before she smiled brightly and said, "Today the money and wood used to repair your houses added up, is only a white deer banquet, that's all. My Yu family doesn't lack money. But because we are all old neighbors in Weiqing and my master is kind, he couldn't stand a person coming to ask for it, so he came forward to do this. If you are worried that my Yu family will take this opportunity to embezzle something, you can leave now. But since you have such prejudice against my family, it's better not to have any contact in the future, to avoid harming our friendship." Shopkeeper Shi Kuanyong hurriedly said, I'm here. I'll have to trouble Shopkeeper Shi to do me a favor and be a witness. My master's actions this time were all kind and not the least bit of other intentions. If there are people who don't know what's good for them and want to measure my master's good intentions, please help me note it down. I Lily can't take this lying down. Shi Kuanyong was the shopkeeper of Moonenju. If she was ordered around by a servant girl from a normal family, she would have left in a huff of anger. But Lily wasn't ordinary. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that this one and the other one in the room were the personal maids of the young master of the Yu family. Their appearances and figures were top-notch. In the future, when the young master of the Yu family got married, these two would no longer be maids but concubines. Being the concubine of such a family and being so favored, she was even more prestigious than being the wife of an ordinary family. He didn't dare to be pretentious and hurriedly cupped his hands. "Miss Lily, what are you saying? How could we be the kind of people who are blind? I'm just saying that if the money and wood are used later, and there's no need for a written contract, this humble servant would like to ask one more thing. Who is it that has such a great reputation to be able to invite young Master Yu? Oh, there's no need for you to sign a contract. Feel free to use it." Lily raised her head slightly and scanned the people in front of the door. "As for the person who invited my young master, it's not convenient for me to say his name. However, a noble of the dragon cult could use immortal spells. Have any of you heard of the dragon cult?" Some people looked at each other in dismay, while others slightly frowned and thought for a while before replying. Although the dragon cult was only strong near Egret Island, there were always people from the city of Wei who went to Egret Island to enjoy the scenery, and there were also people who had relatives in Egret Island. Therefore, among these people, at least 4 or 5 had heard of the name of the dragon cult. Only shopkeeper Sure had a strange expression on his face. After thinking for a while, he said, "I've heard of it. It's that noble of the dragon cult who asked for my young master's help. That's why my young master came to do this." Lily smiled. "I don't want your shop and I don't want your written contract. I just want you to remember the friendship between the Yu family and the dragon cult in the future." After saying these words, she fanned her face with a small handkerchief and squinted at the bright sunlight on the street. "It's such a hot day. If there's nothing else, please go back to your own business. If there's anything you don't have, we, the Yu family and the dragon cult will help to the end." After saying this, she twisted her slender waist, turned around and went back to the house. However, no one had any complaints about her behavior. Even the talkative ones only sighed that this little girl had a good life. Although they were all maidservants, other people were beaten and scolded, but this girl was more prestigious than ordinary young ladies. After standing on the street and thinking for a while, the people finally dispersed. At first, they were worried that the Yu family was plotting for their own property. After listening to Miss Lily's words, although they didn't fully believe her, at least they experienced the Yu family's extravagance. Such a big family saying those words in front of these people today would be difficult to regret in the future. Thereupon, for the time being, he felt at ease. While thinking about the divine dragon cult's background, he hurriedly returned home to settle down. Shi Kuanyong also cupped his hands, frowned and lowered his head as he walked away. But after 4 or 5 steps, he suddenly heard a soft voice from the window of the tea house. "Shopkeeper Shi, please wait." Shi Kuanyong looked inside the window. It was the girl who held the sword and didn't say a word, calling him in a low voice. He slowed down his pace and fell behind the crowd. Then he turned around and walked to the door. He saw the girl waving at him. "It's hot outside, shopkeeper Shi. Come in and have a cup of tea to cool off." Shi Kuanyong smiled, looked at the servant by the door and walked in. Once he entered, he felt a cool breeze as if he had stepped back from summer to spring. Shi Kuanyong was slightly stunned, his gaze swept around the room, and saw a talisman on the wall by the door. This was the Yu family's Daotong talisman to ward off the heat. Wuxia had already put down her sword, poured a cup of plum tea for Shi Kuanyong and placed it in front of him. Shi Kuanyong then sat down, tilting his head to look at the slightly snoring Yu Meng. "Miss Wuxia, this is..." Wuxia also sat in front of him and asked him with a smile, "Shopkeeper Shi just said that I have heard of it." But Wuxia looked at Shopkeeper Shi's expression. "It seems that it's not that simple. Shopkeeper Shi, have you seen someone before?" Shi Kuanyong knew that between the two girls, this Wuxia should be the older one, and her thoughts were more meticulous and steady. He only hesitated for a moment and she saw through him. Although she was only a 14 or 15-year-old girl, she could already take charge of things by herself, and was even more steady and magnanimous than some of the young masters he had met. She was after all a member of the Yu family. But he was not a foppish young master who would become dizzy after seeing a pretty girl. After thinking for a while, he said, "To tell you the truth, I did see someone last night. That person was drinking in my shop, and after midnight he suddenly told me that he was here to catch a demon, and wanted us to leave quickly. At first I thought he was drunk, but then I saw him display his supernatural powers. He drew a little general on a horse and sprinkled a handful of peanuts, which turned into a group of soldiers in red helmets and armor." Miss Wuxia doesn't believe me?" Wusu blinked. Yes, shopkeeper, sure, please speak. It was not that she didn't believe him, but she felt that it was a little interesting. This was the first time she heard someone swear such things, and judging from his identity and tone, he was not trying to coax her. Shi Kuanyong coughed again, turned into a group of soldiers in red helmets and armor, and ran out of the door. Seeing this scene, we naturally understood that we met an expert and also ran out. But after that, last night we saw the strange phenomenon and heard the thunder. He looked at Wusu's expression and added, not only me, the others also saw the strange phenomenon. Those who came just now, almost all saw a little person in red helmets and armor running to their houses, telling them to leave quickly, saying that there was a demon appearing nearby. A few days ago, the city had already suffered a great disaster, and now they saw this in the middle of the night, who dared not to believe it and ran away. Luckily they left in advance. After listening to him, Wusu smiled demurely. That's it. What you were talking about is that expert from the dragon cult. I think he must have killed the demon on the streets last night and destroyed his house, so he asked for help from my young master. You see, this expert is also chivalrous and kind-hearted. Then, without waiting for Shi Kuanyong to speak, she said, Shopkeeper Shi has been delayed for so long, I think you must be anxious. I won't keep you any longer, go back to your work. Another day, Wusu and Lily will visit to thank you. Shi Kuanyong was stunned for a moment, then he understood the little girl's meaning. He laughed bitterly in his heart, stood up and cupped his hands, then goodbye. He walked out the door and only sighed when he reached the son. His son's way of dealing with people was 30% of Wusu's or Miss Lily's skill. He didn't have to worry. They were obviously the two main servant girls of the Tong Fong, but they controlled their aura very well. Since they wouldn't be looked down upon and wouldn't make people feel arrogant, they really shouldn't be underestimated. Just now when she called him in to say those words, she wanted him to go back and spread the news to the neighbors. This was a small matter. People were originally anxious. This was not a bad thing. It was just that old master Yu had always kept these two girls by his idiotic son's side, bright pearls cast into darkness. But shopkeeper Shi didn't see that after he walked far away, the two young servant girls, who were dignified and calm in his heart, suddenly huddled together and hurriedly pushed Yu Ming awake. Then like two little magpies they chattered and told him everything that had just happened. Their previous calmness was completely gone. Yu Ming must have been very sleepy last night, so he didn't wake up just now. At this time he opened his eyes in a daze, and heard the two girls talking to him like popcorn. He felt dizzy, his mouth was dry and his head was swollen. He yawned, smacked his lips and said, "Dry mouth." Lily went to the ice bucket and took out a pear that had been chilled. She used a small silver knife on the table to carefully cut it, removed the core and placed it on a plate, but she still didn't stop eating. Yu Ming sleepily ate 2 pieces of the pear, and when the coolness spread from his throat to his stomach, he felt a little more refreshed. He sat up from the soft chair. So, it really wasn't a dream? Master is right, it really wasn't a dream. Wusu frowned. According to what shopkeeper Shi said, that person must have fought with someone on this small street, won and was injured. Then he came to our mansion and pretended to be a wrong spirit to scare you, young master. If you ask me, what is he plotting? Yu Ming sat on the chair and listened in a daze. After listening for a while he sighed, ate 2 pieces of pear and sighed again. After finishing the entire plate of ice pears, he seemed to have recovered his spirit. He stood up and clapped his hands. The dragon head of the Daqing State's escort agency guild that Li Yunxin had first met by the roadside had returned. That is to say, he clasped his hands behind his back and paced around the tea house. The moment he spoke, the 2 servant girls stopped talking. That person isn't a ghost but a person. He also knows that I saved that youth. The reason why he scared me is because he's afraid that I won't pay for this. Doing this is actually helping the dragon cult to spread their religion. Wusu and Lily hurriedly nodded. Yes, young master is right. But father heard this from me and said that this is also a good thing. Yu Ming frowned as he paced around the room. In my opinion, father is going to Master said that he has heard of the dragon cult. It is very powerful and indeed has some means. I'm afraid that it will spread to the city sooner or later. Master also said that although our family has the title of the richest family in the city of Wei, it is only the richest family. In fact, we can't get involved in many businesses. Wusu blinked and looked at Yu Ming, saying slowly, I want to take this opportunity to sell them a favor. In the future, if the dragon cult really spread to the city, I can also use them. Those who do these things are only after money. As for money, we have it. And the dragon cult have all sorts of people. It will be much more convenient to do things in the future. But Wu Su frowned slightly. I still feel that something is not right. Who cares about him? Hearing this, Yu Ming seemed to finally remember what his father had said. He waved his hand. Helping people is a good thing. Even if that person didn't look for me, I would still help. I am the dragon head of the Daqing State Escort Association. Helping the needy and helping the weak is my duty. Lily hurriedly said, Young master is so kind. Yu Ming laughed, but I must go to Egret Island to take a look. Who is it that pretended to be a ghost to scare me, and how did they know that I have saved people? Wu Su and Lily were stunned and immediately turned pale with fright. Young master, listen to me, this matter we have to. But before he finished speaking, Yu Ming had already excitedly grabbed the gorgeous long sword on the table and jumped out of the door. His feet touched the ground again and he directly jumped to the roof at the side. With a few leaps, he disappeared into the alley. The servant in front of the door was shocked, but not very surprised. This matter? Their young master had done too many things. Wu Su and Lily also ran out of the door. Standing in front of the street under the blazing sun, they anxiously stamped their feet. They shouted at the servant, Chase. Go chase. That servant frowned and said, My two young misses, this isn't the first time, how can we catch up? A bunch of trash. What's the use of keeping you? Lily angrily stamped her feet again. What are you standing there for? Prepare the horses. Hearing this, the servant felt as if he had been granted amnesty. He hurriedly went to the side to fetch 2 spare horses, and hurriedly saddled them. The 2 young ladies didn't even use their legs to push the pedals, and with a flip, they mounted the horses. The 2 large horses with glossy fur immediately galloped away as fast as lightning. That servant looked at Ju Chen's 2 horses and muttered to himself, One great ancestor, 2 little ancestors. Our lives are really bitter. Chapter 152. After the master and 2 servants ran away, the dozen servants standing in front of the tea house had nothing to do. But at least there were fruits and snacks in the house. After waiting for another hour, the sun became hotter and hotter. They all went into the house and ate the snacks. They also ate the fruits in the half-melted ice bucket. A new servant who had not been in the Yu mansion for a long time didn't dare to eat. He only said that in the old master's house he would be beaten. It was not a good thing to eat the master's leftovers. The others laughed and told him that young Master Yu was the most benevolent person. If he came back and saw the fruits in the house, he would lose his temper. The dozen people ate in the tea house for a while. The heat gradually disappeared. But this task was to protect the master. Now that the master had left them behind, they would be scolded if they went back early. So they sat there and chatted. But these young men didn't have much to talk about. After a few words, the topic was still on their master. The new servant was worried and looked to the northwest from time to time. He seemed to be afraid that if something happened to the master, his new task would be gone. One of them saw through his thoughts and asked him with a smile, I didn't know you were so fair. When I first saw you, I thought you were a treacherous official. Now you are really loyal to your master. Let me ask you, are you worried about our young master? The group of people laughed. The new servant blushed. I know young master also knows how to use a sword and is the dragon head of the guild. But after all, he is young master. That sword. Alas, it doesn't look like it is used to beat people. Hearing his words, the group of people smiled meaningfully. The red-faced man who had spoken to him earlier shook his head with a smile. You little brat, did you hear the rumor that our young master is an idiot? That the dragon head of the escort agency is a decoration that the old master told him to sit on? But in reality, he's just a good-for-nothing? The new servant was shocked and hurriedly waved his hand. Don't slander me. I don't dare to say that about my master. How can you say that? Everyone seemed to think that this newcomer's simple-minded appearance was extremely cute, and they all laughed. Another person pointed to the red-faced man. Little Duan, do you know why our second brother Wu is called second brother Wu? He is the eldest son of the family. The newbie widened his eyes and shook his head. Thereupon the man said, I'll let you know he is called Wu Gu, then Dage is our young master. Our second brother Wu's family had been working in the Yu mansion for generations. When young master was a child, he had been close to young master. Later he went to the village outside the city and now he had come back. Not to mention saying these words here, even if he said it in front of young master wouldn't be angry. Second brother Wu smiled and waved his hand. It seemed that he was very happy with his words. He then looked at Duan Ling Tian. Brother, you came here in a hurry and we didn't have the time to tell you about the situation in the Xiaoyang. I'll take advantage of this opportunity to tell you. so that you won't think too much in the future." At this point, the newcomer no longer argued. He only nodded, afraid that he would miss something. Second brother Wu cleared his throat, picked up a small kumquat beside him and slowly peeled it. He said while peeling, "Young master ran away just now, why didn't we chase after him?" Because it wasn't the first time this had happened. In the early days 4 or 5 years ago we were to go along. 2 or 3 years ago I couldn't keep up. You've seen our young master's lightness kung fu. This was a busy city, he didn't want to show his ability. If he ran freely in the wild, ordinary horses wouldn't be able to catch up with him. Just now, when we rode out of the city and looked for young master's traces, at that time he might have already finished his business and returned to the city. The newcomer thought for a moment and stopped talking. Second brother Wu looked at him, put the kumquat in his mouth and chewed until it was full of juice. He wiped his mouth and said, "As for young master's sword, you want to say that young master's kung fu is to strengthen his body, which is different from the kung fu we use to beat people, right?" He grinned. "Have you heard of water-dispelling sword Lu Gong Jiao?" Duan hurriedly said, "Yes. I heard that he is the world's #1 expert. His sword is impenetrable and has been famous for decades." This time everyone in the room laughed proudly. Second brother Wu also said proudly, "Listen carefully, that water-dispelling sword Lu Gong Jiao is our young master's teacher. Lu Gong once said that he has countless disciples and 300 personal disciples, but the one who is most likely to inherit his legacy is our young master. So, do you think that our young master's position as the head of the escort agency has anything to do with our Yu family's power? Of course it does. What about the other reason? Our young master is the proudest disciple of water-dispelling swordsmen, in the Jianghu of the Daqing state, who dares to not give face to water-dispelling swordsmen. As for those who say that our young master is stupid, hey, our young master blindfolded and only used one hand? Let's see if you can cut off his tongue in one move. Those people are the real idiots." These inside stories seemed to have made the newcomer Duan dumbfounded. He digested it in his head for a while, then said, I really didn't know these things before." Seeing him like this, everyone remembered how they were in the past. They only felt that this guy was cute and close again. But who knew that this newcomer was the one who thought too much? After a while he said, "But if we only talk about martial arts, our young master is really good. But I'm not being talkative, but brothers, you all know that my family is poor. It's not easy for me to get into the Yu family. I'm really afraid that I'll make some mistakes and be sent out again. So, I want to ask more questions in case I make mistakes in the future. I mean, our young master, why does master listen to him? I heard that young master's brain." Speaking of this, the people in the room stopped laughing. But it wasn't because of anger or other negative emotions that made them silent. It was more like they were tacitly asking each other's opinion in silence, whether they should say something else to this newcomer. Finally, everyone looked at second brother Wu. So second brother Wu stared at Duan for a while until he became panicked and helpless, then he said, "I don't blame you for thinking like this. Probably only I knew about this matter at first. I mean, among us, some of the older people in the Yu family also knew about it. But some of the older people in the mansion also know about it. I also heard it from my father. Grandpa Wu used to be master's bodyguard." Someone explained. Second brother Wu lowered his head and thought for a while. He said to Duan, "We are all people around young master. These things have to be told to you sooner or later. Seeing that you are loyal and know the rules today, I might as well say it today." After second brother Wu said these words, the atmosphere in the room seemed to become a little strange. The sun was still shining outside, but the room became a little cold. Duan held his breath and nodded carefully. Second brother Wu said, "It is said that our young master was born from a god." When this was said, Duan's eyes widened. Second brother Wu was very satisfied with his reaction and continued, "When our young master was born, he was no different from an ordinary child. But after he could speak, something strange happened. That year, more than 10 years ago, a big business in our Yu family went wrong. My father didn't know what the problem was, but he only knew that there was something wrong with the cloth in the imperial palace. The color didn't match. This was a disaster. Master was so anxious that his hair turned white. He said that one day when he was sitting in the hall worrying, Madam carried the young master over and asked master to see the young master to ease his mood. Master carried the young master in his arms. Suddenly, he heard the young master say, 'I know you have encountered a trouble. But this matter you just need to do this to the cloth. It is not a big deal.'" Little Duan was stunned when he heard that. Everyone said that the young master said that at that time, it is not something a child can say, second brother Wu said vividly. At the same time, he frowned as if he didn't hear it from his father, but saw it with his own eyes. Master was shocked at that time and almost dropped the young master to the ground. Fortunately, Madam caught him. Master then asked, "Who exactly are you, and what evil spirit has possessed my son's body?" The young master said, "My father was a little far away at that time, and it has been a long time so he can't remember clearly. But he said that he was originally a god. Because he received kindness from Master in his previous life, he reincarnated as his son in this life to repay the kindness. But when this god was reincarnated, he had some trouble with the king of hell and drank half a bowl of Mengpo's soup, so the supernatural power was sometimes not effective. When the family heard about this, they all panicked. Who knew if it was really a god or an evil spirit? Because Master alienated Madam for more than a year and didn't often visit the young master. But this time, the method that the young master said worked and our family got through that difficulty. In the next few years there were a few times that things didn't go well. It was said that the god in the young master showed his magical power and told Master the solution. After a few years, we knew that it was really not an evil spirit, but the reincarnation of a god. Second brother Wu's expression gradually changed from mysterious to carefree, so Master no longer alienated Madam and the young master. He only said that it was his previous life's good karma. In this life he wanted to do more good things. That's why the escort agency guild was formed. Now it's just a small escort agency that the Master uses money to support. Xiao Duan was stunned as if he couldn't believe that there was such a magical thing. After a while he said, Now the young master." Second brother Wu paused and sighed, "Alas, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It is said that before the young master was 10 years old, the god often showed his magical power. But gradually as he grew older the magical power became less and less. Until one summer the young master naughtily jumped on the roof to play in the rainy night, and was struck by lightning." Xiao Duan exclaimed in a low voice. "It's strange that he was fine. He just fainted and fell from the roof and only scratched his skin." Second brother Wu said while thinking, "At that time I was already by the young master's side. Because of this I was sent to the farm outside the city. But it is said that since then the god never showed his magical power again. The old people said that it was because Yama complained to the heaven, so the heaven ruler knew that the god reincarnated in our family. The heaven ruler promised him 10 years to repay the kindness, and then sent the lightning to take the god away. So look at the young master now." Second brother Wu sighed. "It is said that because the heaven ruler took the immortal, the young master's soul was incomplete, so he seemed a little silly. Alas, but Master is still good to the young master. He will also take the young master's words to heart. He has helped our family through many difficulties before. But let's not talk about the past, let's talk about the present." Second brother Wu stood up and clapped his hands. "Our young master has never done anything bad and he is also good to us. He is more warm-hearted. But those gossiping fools always do stupid things. I Wu Wenk don't think they are better than our young master." Everyone stood up with him and nodded their heads in agreement. Little Duan blinked his eyes and seemed to agree with second brother Wu's words. So he knew that after listening to what they said today, he had really integrated himself into this small group. After talking for so long he had finished all the fruits. The group of people cleaned up, called the owner of the tea house back and gave him some money. They were ready to go to the city gate to welcome their young master. Unexpectedly, when they just walked out of this small street, they saw their young master, Wu Su and Miss Lily were surrounded by a group of people. They were not in danger but they were in trouble. These servants also recognized the group of people surrounding their young master, and they were friends with them. They were the escorts and assistants of several escort companies in the city of Wei. Working in this line of work depended on strength, so they always had some skills. In the city of Wei there was always a private circle. So although they were not old neighbors, they were closer than nodding acquaintances. At present, the escorts and assistants of the 3 escort companies, and even some of their family members somehow caught Yu Meng, who was going to Egret Island, and knelt in a circle around him, right on this street. They all knew their young master's character. Their young master was not afraid of people who used force, but when faced with people who used force, he was at his wits' end. Although Wu Su and Li Li weren't easy to bully, they were surrounded by 50 to 60 people kneeling in a circle. They couldn't hit or scold them and could only protect their young master. No one knew what they were talking about in the midst of the commotion. As soon as second brother Wu saw this, he hurriedly led the crowd to rush over. He only cared about his young master. He didn't care about the old, the weak, the women and the children. He brutally squeezed through the crowd of people who were kneeling on the ground. More than 10 servants with sticks surrounded Yu Meng. Only then did second brother Wu calm down a little. He glanced at the crowd and cursed, "You short-lived old sixth Lu and you big pockmark Wang death rush. Are you guys tired of living or are your bones too tight? Open your dog eyes and see who are you surrounding? If my young master loses even a hair, don't blame me for being ruthless, get out." However, those people did not take his words to heart. They only begged, "Dragonhead, save us. Dragonhead, please save the lives of my family." Chapter 153. The women and children in the crowd cried even louder after being scolded by second brother Wu. A few of them even tried to hug second brother Wu's legs. Seeing this, second brother Wu was confused. He had thought that these people were bullying his young master and were here to ask for rewards. His young master had a good temper and a good heart. Everyone in the city of Wei knew that. Thus, there would always be some people, whether they had something to do or not, who would kneel on the street and start crying. His young master could not stand it and quickly gave them money. He thought that it would be the same today, but now that he looked carefully, it did not seem like it. Yu Meng could not stand it either. Thus, when he was surrounded by his own people, he felt calmer. He was not afraid of what they would do to him. He just could not stand the crying and begging. Hearing this, he was at a loss and did not know how to deal with it. Only now did he calm down and finally let out a long sigh. Don't cry, don't cry. Tell me what happened. I Dragonhead am here. I will help you." Hearing this, Wu Su and Lily also sighed. At first they were only seen by a few people and were entangled. But they only knelt on the ground and cried for help, not willing to tell what happened. After a while, a large group of people rushed over. It seemed that they were holding these 3 people back while the others went to report. Now that everyone was here and the onlookers on the street were all here, they were willing to talk. Such a bullying method, other than his young master, who else would not be beaten away? At this moment, the mistress of the Wanshan escort company let out a long drawn-out wail and threw herself in front of Yu Meng. "Dragonhead, you must save my master's life. The emperor of the Li kingdom passed away and sealed off the border passes. He also said that my master is a spy for the kingdom of Qin. He was detained along with the goods." Hearing this, the people kneeling on the ground were even more mournful. Second brother Wu's eyebrows, which had been raised, slowly relaxed. Now he knew why these people were making such a fuss. It was not an exaggeration at all. They really wanted to save his family's life. After half an hour, he finally understood the whole story. The Daqing state and the Li state were separated by the Yi state. But the territory of the Yi kingdom was not a round piece, but a long strip. It was bordered by 6 other countries. As a result, the journey from the Daqing state to the Li state via the Yi state was not long. It would only take a month to cross over. The Daqing state was to the south, while the Li state was to the north, so there were many goods that could be easily circulated. However, only a large escort agency would dare to accept this kind of business that spanned across 3 countries. A trip to a medium-sized escort agency meant risking one's life. But if a small escort agency wanted to make a trip, it would be impossible for him to do it himself. He would need 3 or 4 agencies to work together. Just like what was happening before his eyes. The Wanshun, Quanshun and Zhaoyuan escort agencies of the city of Wei teamed up and made a trip to the state of Li. The 3 leaders followed along, afraid that something might happen along the way. He thought that this time, once he passed through the escort route and paid his respects to the mountain peaks along the way, it would be a great road with little capital and great profits. However, a few days ago, as soon as they entered the state of Li, they were detained by the Li border army along with the goods. At first, they thought that the border army wanted to take advantage of them. They could always solve the problem by gritting their teeth and paying a little bit of money. Although this kind of thing was not common, it was not unheard of. However, 2 days later they found out, the Sky Emperor of the state of Li had passed away last month. The death of the Sky Emperor seemed to be due to some internal struggle in the palace, and the news had only reached the border at this time. As a result, the border was sealed as usual, and as usual, the goods were detained. This time, the people in the escort agency knew that a disaster was imminent. The death of the emperor was the time when the military was the most vigilant. All possibilities could become reality at this time. For example, there were contraband goods hidden in the carriage from the neighboring country, or they were not escorts at all but spies. This extremely sensitive time, where they would rather kill 100 people than let a single one go by mistake, was always the time when the border army made a fortune. Almost no one would be investigated after the incident, because it was all because the generals were too loyal to protect the country. After many difficulties, someone finally released a carrier pigeon, and after many obstacles the news was sent back to the escort agency. The 3 agencies were not the only ones that were detained. There were also a few medium-sized agencies. But there was not a single large agency. They had very tacitly stopped their business to the state of Li last month. Those medium-sized agencies always had channels to enter the gate of the Yu mansion and ask to see the Lord. But these 3 small agencies could not even see the face of the gatekeeper of the Yu mansion, and could only stop the nominal dragon head of the Daqing State's Escort Association on the street. When this matter was announced on the street, everyone was in an uproar. Even Yu Meng was a little stunned. Such a thing actually happened. The escort agency of his guild, the escort agency of the city of Wei, actually had such a thing happen. Seeing his expression, the group of people cried even louder. The mistress of the Wanshan escort agency was afraid that the dragon head would find this matter too troublesome and refuse, so she was so flustered that she blurted out, "Dragon head, you saved my master, so I have a big secret to tell you. You can avoid disaster in advance." But Yu Ming did not care and only thought that the woman was delirious. He furrowed his brows and agreed. Then he searched for money on his body, and also the gold and silver that Wuxia and Lily had on them, and gave them away. He also promised those people that he would send a sum of money that night to help them tide over their difficulties. After coaxing and coaxing for a while, these people finally dispersed crying. So that matter also spread. The heavenly emperor of the Li state had passed away. But when almost everyone's attention was focused on the death of the heavenly emperor, there was another person standing under a tree on the street, raised his eyebrows. He was concerned about the words of the woman. "Dragon head, you saved my master. I have a big secret to tell you, so you can avoid trouble in advance." This sentence was very interesting. Since the group of people knew that the fool Yu Meng was easy to bully, and knew to use this method to beg him, it seemed that they had no way out. The words of a person who had no way out were more trustworthy. This woman said this. Her man was detained by the Li State's border army, and there was a high chance that he would be beheaded. This was a first-class disaster. But then she said another disaster, that seemed to be even bigger than the matter of her man dying. It sounds really curious. Li Yunxin held a piece of watermelon in his hand and said softly. He really had nothing to do today and his heart was not very comfortable. He was not the kind of person who liked to be unknown, and was actually quite happy to join in the fun. When he accomplished something, he hoped that someone would praise him and exclaim in admiration, "Amazing!" That would be even better. But ever since he left that mountain village he had to hide. Last night he killed that person, and he had to leave quietly. It was really annoying. Killing Qing Liangji was a spur-of-the-moment idea. Although he made some follow-up plans to minimize the scope of this accident, he still needed some time to observe. Observe Yunzi's reaction. Observe Lord Dongting's reaction after hearing some of Red Lady's descriptions of him. So, it was so damn boring. Although there were some other important things for him to deal with in the city of Wei, from last night to this afternoon, he had finished all of them. So he became interested in Meng and followed him, wanting to see what other stupid things this silly young master could do. When he came to this street he felt bored and wanted to go out for a walk, but he suddenly found, there was a blue stone well at the entrance of the alley. And the family at the entrance of the alley thought of a good business because of this well. They bought some watermelons, packed them in clean baskets and hung them into the well. They kept them for a night and took them out at noon to sell. If someone wanted to buy it they fished it out from the well and cut it open. It was cold. After a bite it was so cool that it went straight to the bone. Li Yunxin saw this watermelon, and was so happy that he couldn't walk anymore. It was summer. If he didn't eat a piece of cold watermelon, how could it be considered as the beginning of summer? This was the beauty of the human world. If the world was full of demons there would be no cold watermelon to eat. Then he heard that sentence. Li Yunxin hesitated between the watermelon stall and the woman for a while, but he still followed. For him, curiosity was a good thing. The more information he received, the more variables he could refer to, and the more choices he could make. Curiosity also meant that he subconsciously thought this matter was different and could be related to his own interests. For the current Li Yunxin, there were not many people in the secular world that could make him curious. So, holding the watermelon, he followed the woman of the Wanshan escort company. Following the group of a dozen people down 2 streets, Li Yunxin realized why he was curious. The people of the Qing kingdom all knew about the emperor of the Li kingdom. Just now, the news of his death had been publicly announced on the street, and it would probably spread throughout the city of Wei in 2 or 3 days. Then it would also spread throughout the Daqing state. Then people from many other countries would know about this, right? Just the city of Wei had a population of 300,000. If the emperor's soul had not been taken away by Black Bai Yanjun because of some things, this kind of wish, Li Yunxin suddenly realized what the woman was probably going to say. After walking for another quarter of an hour, he turned into a quiet alley. After a dozen steps, the person in front of them suddenly stopped and turned around. There were 2 thuds behind them and 2 people jumped down from both sides of the wall. They must have felt something was wrong and climbed over the wall to get here. Among the people in front, an escort frowned and cupped his hands to Li Yunxin. "Friend, you've been following me for so long. You have to give me an explanation, right?" It was Li Yunxin's fault for not hiding himself. But if he hid himself, there would only be a watermelon petal floating in the air. It was not a good way to hide one's tracks. However, there was no one in the alley so they could talk. There was no need to follow him home. Li Yunxin sighed and cupped his hands with the watermelon. "I mean no harm. I'm just an ordinary bystander. But I'm more concerned about the disaster you're talking about. What is it?" The escort did not speak. He looked at him with a gloomy gaze as if trying to see through his identity. He was a scholar in a white robe with a fan at his waist and a white jade pendant hanging on it. There were 3 spots of watermelon juice on the front of his robe. The only thing different about him was that he was handsome and good-looking. Oh, and there was a half-eaten watermelon petal in his hand. He really couldn't see anything. The escort said, "Your Excellency, you should first reveal your identity. If you're a noble young master, you won't misunderstand and hurt our friendship." Li Yunxin smiled and did not answer him. "I'm more curious about this. Half an hour ago you were crying on the street. Now you're all calm and collected. Especially that woman. She's completely different from before. Actually, you should know about this, right? According to what you've said in front of the master, the big escort agencies in the city of Wei stopped their business with the Li Kingdom a month ago. The emperor of the Li Kingdom passed away a month ago. I think those big escort agencies must have someone in the Li Kingdom's court. They must have told them in advance and stopped their business. If those escort agencies know about this, the Yu family should know even more. But Yu Meng is the head of the escort association and didn't say anything. That's why your small and medium-sized escort agencies were detained. I think that Yu Meng really didn't know about it. As for the master of the Yu family, I think he purposely made you fall? So that he could take over your businesses? You also know about this. You also know that your master is going to die. That's why you came out on the street to make a scene. Is it to let the whole city know so that the Yu family can't do it? No. If Master Yu could be so cruel to want your master dead, why would he care about what you did? I think you actually... Li Yunxin pretended to be enlightened. You really just wanted to get some money from young Master Yu to run away. Madam, what was your mentality when you shouted on the street just now? Li Yunxin seemed to find it even more interesting. He laughed. I guess it was because you really hated them and thought that the disaster was coming. Even the people of the Yu family couldn't be saved. So you couldn't help but shout it out. You wanted to sentence them to death early so that you could vent your anger, right? That's right. This also explains why you all look so solemn right now. That's the expression a calm avenger should have. After saying this, Li Yunxin took a big bite of the watermelon and gave a thumbs up to the people in front of him. I like people like you. Calm, steady, cohesive, and unscrupulous. Sooner or later you will achieve something big. The escort glanced at the housewife beside him. I don't remember any young master in the city with a brain like him. This accent is also not from the city of Wei. The woman finally spoke. She was in her 30s. Her hair was a little messy because she was crying and kowtowing on the street. But at this moment she was calm and composed. This was the real core of this group of people. She looked at Li Yunxin and laughed coldly. You like to eat melons? I've seen many crazy people who pretend to be masters. First, pick out the tendons of his limbs, then ask questions. As soon as she finished speaking, the 4 escorts in front and behind her immediately growled and pounced forward. A friend in the book review section is discussing the exchange rate of 1 tael of silver in this book. In China's history, 1 tael of silver was worth roughly 150 to 450 renminbi. Oh, you guys noticed that 1 tael of silver in Qing is worth 2,000 renminbi. This was mentioned once when Li Yunxin first met the Qiao's escort agency. He said that 1 tael of silver was enough to cover the monthly expenses of a middle-class family in the Daqing state. That seems to be how it was written, which means 1 tael of silver is 2,000 renminbi. This is because I increased the exchange rate. The reason is that in many books, a simple meal in a small restaurant can easily cost a few taels of silver, nearly 11,000 renminbi, so I did the opposite. Also, when I wrote that Li Yunxin tossed Xiao Duanhong 1 tael of silver, instead of 10 taels of silver, it seemed more, how should I put it? Consider it my personal mystery, the word 1 always feels more ancient, ha. Chapter 154. Although Li Yunxin could easily kill a top-class master in Jianghu, he might not be better than a third-rate warrior in terms of skill. Because the cultivators tempered their bodies and souls, their reaction speed, strength, and body toughness were far beyond the imagination of mortals. Therefore, the marvelous strike of a super-expert was probably nothing more than an old woman waving her sword in his eyes, which could be broken easily. But even so, he could see that the 4 escorts from Wanshan Escort Agency were not ordinary. They were almost at the level of a second-rate master. And Xiao Duanhong, the head of Hongfu Escort Agency of Qiao's family, was only a second-rate master in the Qiao family, and he had just touched the edge. This Wanshan Escort Agency was interesting. While he was thinking about this, the 4 people had already rushed to him. They cooperated well and blocked his retreat. No matter how he dodged or counterattacked, he would have to pay a price. It was impossible for him to escape unscathed. Li Yunxin could even see that even though the 4 people rushed to him, the escort who spoke, the woman who called herself San Yang, and the other servants did not let down their guard. They were just waiting. If this person was really a master, then they could rush to him again or fly away. But the next moment, there was a short and suppressed low cry. But the low cry also stopped abruptly. The 4 people who rushed to him directly passed through his body and hit something. Dizzy and shocked, they took a few punches and kicks and rolled far away in a rather inelegant but effective way, looking at Li Yunxin as if they had seen a ghost. Where he was standing just now, there was only a half-eaten watermelon floating in the air. Another mouthful was lost. This situation was not in any consideration. The escorts, San Yang, and servants who were ready to help were all stunned. This was the first time in their lives that they had experienced such a supernatural experience, although there had been many miraculous things happening in the city of Wei recently. After being stunned for a moment, Li Yunxin's figure reappeared. I really like to eat melons and I really want to know what disaster you are talking about. It's really boring. Li Yunxin sighed. Don't run. You can't run away. The last sentence stopped the madam and the escorts who were about to pull him away. After all, they were people of the pugilistic world, so they had to be braver. Moreover, this person didn't look ferocious and he had divine abilities, but he didn't take the initiative to attack. It seemed that they could still negotiate. San Yang took a deep breath and pinched her fingertips in her sleeves, pretending it wasn't a dream. His teeth chattered as he asked, Your Excellency, who exactly are you? I'm just an ordinary dragon cult disciple. I want to know what you mean. Li Yunxin finally finished eating the melon. He looked around and whispered, This is municipal construction. Then he threw the melon skin to the ground. The people of the escort agency immediately stared at the watermelon skin vigilantly, studying it for a while. Seeing that he did not say anything else and only stared at her, San Yang thought it over. If San Yang tells you everything, will you let us go? We'll just pretend we didn't see what happened today. In the future? Yes, say it quickly. San Yang hesitated again and gave the escort beside her a look. The escort understood that San Yang meant to say, I'll tell him, but this person's intentions aren't that simple. Prepare yourselves, if the other party makes a move, we can't just sit here and wait for death. The escort understood, and his fingers curled behind his back as he made a few secret signals. The other 10 or so people suppressed their fear, knowing that this could be the strangest and most difficult hurdle of their lives. But they had to think of a way to get through it. San Yang opened her mouth. Your Excellency should be able to tell that we aren't ordinary escorts. In fact, I used to be the daughter of the Qian family castle's copper coin escort, Qian Wudu. 20 years ago, the Qian family castle offended the Eagle King, Sun Dingheng. Only a few loyal family servants and I managed to escape. As she said this, she observed the young man's expression without batting an eyelid. The other party's expression did not change. San Yang's heart sank slightly. There was no one in Jianghu who had not heard of the Eagle King Castle's destruction of the Qian family castle. They should also be aware of the carnage that the descendants of the Qian family castle would cause in Jianghu. But he remained calm and collected. This meant that the other party already knew about this. Who had invited such an expert to come here? 20 years later? San Yang gritted her teeth and continued, After that, I changed my name and married Wan Tongda of the Wanshan Escort Agency. All these years, I've never been involved in Jianghu matters. Some of the people around me are descendants of the Chen family, while others were loyal servants who escaped with me. All these years they slowly came to the agency. The master didn't know about it. This time, when the master got into trouble, I was anxious, but I knew that he couldn't be saved. I also know what your excellency said before. This was a vicious scheme by the big escort agencies in the Yu family. It was to annex us. Among those who went to the Li Kingdom was a former loyal servant of the Chen family castle, an expert in the art of flying pigeons. This time he risked his life to spread the news. So your excellency is right. We only wanted to swindle some money from young Master Yu. When the money arrives tonight, we will leave immediately and never return to the city of Wei. She carefully looked at Li Yunxin. Of course I will remember this grudge, but whether or not I can take revenge, I am a weak woman and I still have a child at home. I have my own considerations. After saying this, she only looked at Li Yunxin. But Li Yunxin waited for a while, blinking his eyes. Huh? Friend, I'm asking, what is the disaster you mentioned? Not your family's business? As soon as he said this, Qian Sanyang and the escort exchanged glances. This person was difficult to deal with. What Sanyang said just now was half true, half false. And this person didn't seem to believe it completely. So she asked about the disaster. She was trying to beat around the bush. Qian Sanyang took a small step back and said in a low voice, as for the disaster, the messenger pigeon said that there seemed to be a battle between strange beasts at the border of the Li Kingdom. The battle was chaotic and 3 villages were destroyed in a row. This happened before we were detained by the carriages last month. Then I heard that the strange beasts went south, entered the Yi Kingdom and destroyed another 11 villages. The person who sent the letter said it was possible that they would enter the Qing Kingdom. Li Yunxin was stunned for a while, then frowned. Strange beasts? Qian Sanyang thought for a while, then said with some hesitation, the messenger pigeon said, the victims of the disaster said, it was demons. As she said this, she waited for the young man to burst into laughter. The other party would definitely think that she was evading. After all, this kind of thing was too unimaginable. When she said on the street that there was a disaster coming, she was indeed talking about this. But it wasn't like what this young man said, that he didn't believe it and shouted it to vent his anger. In fact, it was because he didn't believe it that he wanted it to come. Who would have thought that after hearing this, the young man would fall silent? Previously, his expression was indifferent, as if he was just asking about something fun. Chen Sanyang knew that it was because his martial arts were extremely high, and he had some kind of special skill. He was toying with them like a cat toying with a mouse. And now his silence was not a good thing. The other party was confirming what she had just said. The so-called wanting to know what the disaster was definitely an excuse. Perhaps he was still delaying them, waiting for their pursuers for reinforcements? Or perhaps the Yu family's plot this time was because they had discovered her identity and it was completely targeted at them? Thinking of this, Qian Sanyang's body suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. They really seemed to have reached the end of the road. She turned her head and glanced at the escort beside her. After being together for so many years, they had long since understood each other's intentions. The escort saw the determination in Qian Sanyang's eyes. They had fled for so long, concealed their identities for so long, and now they had fallen into such a situation. Even if he were to die this time, he couldn't die in obscurity like a scoundrel. The escort took a deep breath and clenched his teeth. Then, his fingers, which were hidden behind his back, quickly changed their movements as he issued a few commands. The alley was instantly overflowing with murderous intent. At this moment, Li Yunxin raised his head and smiled at Chen Sanyang. I understand. All right, thank you very much for today. Then, with a flash of his figure, he disappeared from where he stood. He was going to make his move. Thank your grandma. The escort roared, his pair of eagle claws pouncing on the spot where Li Yunxin had just been standing. Behind him, Chen Sanyang's hands crossed, and the sky was filled with copper coin darts, covering every corner where that person could possibly be hiding. The other dozen or so servants all gave up their lives, and with expressions as if they were ready to die, they summoned all the energy in their bodies and threw themselves at the same spot. Li Yunxin stood on the other side of the alley on the roof watching these people and sighed helplessly. He really just wanted to ask what that disaster meant. But now, he had already left the alley for a quarter of an hour. The dozen or so people from the Wanshan escort agency were still cautiously retreating to the other side of the alley on guard. As long as you're happy, he muttered and flew straight to the north of the city. But whether it was the people from the Wanshan escort agency or Li Yunxin, their current shock and worry, no matter what, probably couldn't compare to the enlightened spiritual master Yunzi of the Pill Cauldron Sect's Weiqing station. Last night he had taken out a talisman and didn't know if he should use it. After weighing the pros and cons he took it back. But after 2 hours he received another piece of news. This news completely dispelled the idea of asking for help from the Grotto Heaven sect. Daotong and Kenzo, a mysterious realm Grotto Heaven sect master, 3 true realm sect masters, they had fallen in the Li Kingdom. Not even their souls were preserved. And all this was because of a mortal. Once upon a time, a different mortal. The Heavenly Emperor of the Li Kingdom. This Li Emperor died 19 days ago. That day, Li Yunxin turned a river of sour soup on Weiqing's Changmen Street. Daotong and Kenzo received the news 18 days ago. The Li Kingdom's court hid the news of the emperor's death, and refused to announce the cause of his death until last night. It was said that his body was still placed in the Golden Palace. 19 princes led their troops into the capital, and 4 princes had already died within the palace walls. The crown prince planned to ascend the throne early, but the ministers in the court became his biggest obstacle. All in all, the largest empire in the known world had become a mess. But even worse, for some reason the Black and White Yama kings didn't manage to take away the Heavenly Emperor's soul in time. Hundreds of millions of people of the Li Kingdom were blessed with the will of the Heavenly Emperor. Within 6 hours of his death, the Heavenly Emperor's soul became a ghost emperor. 6 hours. His cultivation broke through the peak of the profound realm, and approached the realm of supreme indifference. Fortunately, according to tradition, after receiving news of an emperor's death, Daotong and Kenzo would send high-level cultivators above the true realm to the country to deal with the crisis, to deal with the danger that if Black Bai Yanjun didn't manage to take away the emperor's soul in time, the soul would be instantly blessed with the will of the Heavenly Emperor. And this time the one who died was the Heavenly Emperor of the Li Kingdom. Because they knew that the Li Kingdom had a large population, the 5 cultivators who went to the Li Kingdom were Daotong's Luofu Paradise's leader, Shi's mysterious realm cultivator Quan Yangzi, Kenzo's Chongshao Paradise's leader, Taoist enlightened realm cultivator Wei Liaozi, Daotong's Zhou Tian Lingbao School's leader, Taoist enlightened realm cultivator Tong Zhouzi, Daotong's leader, Taoist enlightened realm cultivator Ling Guzi, Kenzo's leader, Taoist enlightened realm cultivator Ji Yoshi. 2 profound realm cultivators and 3 true realm cultivators. Such a lineup could practically destroy a country within a month. However, only Kenzo's leader, Chongshao Paradise's leader, Wei Liaozi, survived. His cultivation was completely crippled. No one could have expected that something would really go wrong. That was the Li Kingdom's emperor. How could Black Bai Yanjun just sit back and watch such a huge change happen? By the time the 5 cultivators realized that the situation had changed, the Li Kingdom's emperor's soul had already transformed into a ghost emperor's body with the help of the millions of people's will, and fled thousands of miles away. The 5 of them immediately used their own abilities and chased after him. Although the Li Kingdom's emperor was extremely powerful, he was still immortal. After his death, even though his soul had transformed into a ghost emperor's body, his mind was still not clear, and he wasn't as smart and capable as he was when he was alive. Thus, at this time, even though they knew that the ghost emperor's cultivation was close to the 2 sages, the 5 cultivators still chased after him. If he escaped and went somewhere else after a few days, he would regain his consciousness and understand some Taoist techniques. At that time he really wouldn't be able to be subdued. However, even though he was muddle-headed, the ghost emperor still relied on his extremely powerful instincts to kill the 4 cultivators, and also destroyed Wei Liaozi's snow mountain and ocean of qi. After this battle, the ghost emperor was also heavily injured, and his mind was even more muddled. For a moment he crashed into the Yi Kingdom's territory, the Tongtian Sea where Long Sun hatred resided. Long Ertzi hatred was a bloodthirsty and cruel person, and was a profound realm demon. The waters under his jurisdiction included the Yi Kingdom, and spanned across half of the Li Kingdom. The ghost emperor charged into his territory, and didn't know how to communicate or avoid. Moreover, it encountered a fiery fiend like hatred, and they immediately fought. Unfortunately, the ghost emperor was already an arrow at the end of its flight, and it just had to run into a powerful profound realm demon. Sadly, although hatred dominated the world, the ghost emperor was a peerless expert that only appeared once in 1,000 years. After a battle, the ghost emperor disappeared, and Long Sun hatred also disappeared, It seemed that both sides had suffered injuries and were afraid of being taken advantage of, so they both fled. This was the battle between beasts that Chen Sanyang had mentioned. Note 1. There are 3 stages of the true realm. From low to high they are enlightened master, advanced enlightened master, and perfect harmony master. There are 3 stages of the profound realm. From low to high, they are Shi mysterious master, advanced mysterious master, and broad mysterious master. Chapter 155. But even Li Yunxin probably didn't know better than Yunzi how serious this matter was. This was the first time in the last 500 years that a true realm cultivator died in a battle between Daotong and Kenzo, 3 at once, and 1 at the profound realm. And this was the first time in the last 1,400 years that the soul of an emperor was infused with the power of will and became a ghost emperor. What the cultivators had been worrying about for thousands of years had finally become reality. Even if they were prepared, they still felt fear in the face of such a tragic result. But the cultivators couldn't think of a better way to solve this problem. Because of the social environment and the limitations of productivity, there seemed to be no better way than an emperor ruling the world. In order to avoid something like the Li Emperor, Daotong and Kenzo had always avoided the appearance of an even more powerful unified dynasty. The Li kingdom was already the limit they could accept. But now, it seemed that this limit needed to be changed again. But no matter how much it changed, there must be an emperor. The cultivators of course didn't want an emperor. In fact, every mortal emperor was a terrifying demon in reserve. But the Devis, when they first passed down the heavenly heart technique, they wanted the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo to shepherd the people and protect humanity. A long time ago, some people thought that this was a high-sounding statement, just like how the emperors of the mortal world demanded their officials to be honest and upright. And so they tested the law. Because of their personal interests, they caused the world to be in turmoil. More than 10 countries were at war for hundreds of years, tens of millions of people lost their homes, and millions died in the chaos. And so in the next 1,000 years, there was no news from the Devis. In that era, the techniques of Daotong and Kenzo hadn't been completely passed down, and many of the more profound heavenly heart techniques still awaited the Devis divine revelation. And so in that 1,000 years, the cultivators' realm stagnated, and there were many high-level cultivators who reached a bottleneck but couldn't find a way to break through, went mad, and died. That extremely severe punishment almost severed the inheritance of Daotong and Kenzo. It wasn't until 1,000 years later, when the world's population gradually recovered to the level before the war, that the Devis revelation came again. Thus, the cultivators knew that it wasn't a joke, to shepherd the people and protect humanity. Thus, from then on, cultivators might have killed mortals in private and committed crimes, but no one dared to cause a large-scale upheaval. Hundreds of years ago, the Daqing state attacked the Yi dynasty because the emperors of the Yi dynasty were muddle-headed and the people had no way to live. Moreover, Emperor Yi offended Daotong and Kenzo. Then, the heroes of the country rose up. The cultivators just followed the trend of the world. The celestial beings needed the world to be prosperous and have a large population. They didn't even care if one person killed hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people. As long as the foundation of this world was not harmed and the general trend of the world was not hindered, they would not personally punish some people. Therefore, there must be an emperor. In fact, the cultivators were not only worried about the emperor. Li Yunxin once asked Ling Kongzi a question that cultivators would also ponder over. The soul of an emperor was instantly turned into a demon when it was infused with the power of wish. As for the famous great demons in the human world, such as Dragon Sun and Hatred, who in the mortal world didn't know that they were incomparably bloody and cruel monsters? In many places, when a child cried at night, they only needed to say that hatred was here, and the child would immediately stop crying. Such great demons, when the population of the world increased in the future, would become tyrannical like the Ghost Emperor. Human cultivators had limited talent in cultivation. Although their numbers would gradually increase, the future was predictable. However, those demons, connate great demons, postnatal great demons, and great demons born from the power of wish would all flourish with the prosperity of humanity. Yunzi knew the thoughts of the 2 sages and the high-level cultivators. This time Lu Ling killed Dragon Sun, but it was actually a test. That Geo Dragon Sun wasn't particularly powerful, but its identity was extremely special. After killing it, Daotong would then subdue the Wei River, and it would depend on the reaction of the demons. Human cultivators and demons had lived in peace for tens of thousands of years, and now, it was indeed time to do something. This time, Emperor Li had become a ghost emperor, 4 high-level cultivators had fallen, and one of them had been crippled. In Yunzi's eyes, it was already an obvious sound of war drums. Dao Tong and Kenzo would not tolerate such a loss, and Dao Tong and Kenzo would definitely take revenge. The letter said that when the ghost emperor escaped, his soul dharma was already broken, and his body and soul almost disappeared. However, after all, there were still many believers and hundreds of millions of people were sustaining its life bit by bit. In time it would definitely recover. As for Yazi, the second son of the dragon, he was also heavily injured, and had fled south. Fled to the south, in the afternoon sunlight of the Shangqing Alchemy Tripod Station in the city of Wei, Yunzi slightly narrowed his eyes. To the south of the Yi Kingdom was the Qing Kingdom. The Ghost Emperor could almost be said to have escaped the pursuit. The 2 sages would not leave Spirited Mountain for this kind of thing. This meant that after it recovered, there would be another big demon in the Shen realm in this world. There were already enough powerful demons, and the high-level cultivators were not happy to see this result. So since there was one more, they had to eliminate one more and this world would be peaceful. For example, that dragon's son, Hatred who was injured and weak. The cultivators couldn't find Yazi, nor could they find the Ghost Emperor. But Yunzi seemed to have some clues. For example, the person who killed Qing Liangzi last night. For example, the dragon cult. This was a miraculous skill. And the 2 sects of Dao Tong had vacancies of the patriarchs. Although he did not have the highest cultivation, he was the most capable to do this. This enlightened perfected master let out a soft sigh, and the shock and fear caused by some things last night were all gone. He decided not to wait any longer. He needed to figure out whether the person behind the divine dragon cult was the one he had imagined, or not. By the time night fell, Li Yunxin had already done a lot of things, just because of Qian Sanyang's disaster. Apart from the soul of Qiao Jiasen, who was still in a daze, the remaining 4 demons were ordered around by him. At times like this he had a lot to say, but there was really no one to talk to. So he missed the days when he was with Lu Laodao. Old Lu was a good listener, and every well-timed compliment and surprise made him feel good. This kind of person was really hard to come by. He had to find a time to settle this matter. Li Yunxin sat on a green stone by the Willow River in the city, looking at the people coming and going on the street, thinking that he would have to explain himself to old Lu sooner or later. He didn't say it before because the situation was unclear, and he was afraid that he would be too deeply involved. At this critical juncture, once he found out some things, the plan could be fully launched. This was the end of the old street of the city of Wei. In the Dai dynasty, there was a sentry post of the imperial guards from here. A few hundred meters ahead was the wide square in front of the palace, and further north was the front gate of the Yi dynasty's Zijin Palace, the Ziki Gate. But looking north in the night, the majestic Ziki Gate of the past had already collapsed, leaving only the tall remains, like a giant beast in the twilight. There was no sound of people or lights in the vast area behind it. Even the sounds of insects and plants were rare. This was because after the city of Wei was attacked and the Zijin Palace was burned down, the masters of Dao Tong and Kenzo set up a formation here, to trap the resentment of the dead in the palace in one place, and use the yang qi and earthly qi of the city of Wei to slowly dispel it. So, not to mention insects and plants, even people who lived in this ruined palace for a few days would be seriously ill because of the resentment. Li Yunxin was sitting at the end of the old street. Opposite him was a calligraphy and pen shop. At first, he was surprised to see this shop. How could there be people selling the 4 treasures of the study in this damn place? But he quickly figured out the key. Those unsuccessful scholars of the Dai dynasty liked to come to the end of the old street, to the deserted square in front of the palace to mock the present. They were scholars. After drinking some wine, they would want to write poems and leave their names. So they needed a brush, ink, paper and inkstone. The shop made a fortune in an unorthodox way. But now there were many miraculous things happening in the city of Wei, and gentlemen believed in the principle of not standing on a collapsing wall, so the business of this shop had been slow recently. But the owner of the shop was still open. It was almost midnight, but the lights were still on in the shop. In an old shop, there was a white lantern hanging in front of the door, giving off a faint light. Because it was hot summer, the windows were not boarded, and only the door was closed. There was a faint candlelight inside, and occasionally the shadow of the owner could be seen on the paper window, not knowing what he was busy with. But there was also a faint shadow of curling smoke. There was a big willow tree next to the shop, and it was dark on both sides. There were some scattered people on the street, but they were all going home. Li Yunxin bit a green plum and looked at the people in the shop, frowning because of the sourness. He ate half of the plum and the person he was waiting for finally came. A fierce-looking soldier riding a big horse came out of the darkness, and walked to the front of Li Yunxin. He stood in the light from the window of the calligraphy and pen shop, but there was no shadow on the ground. As soon as he got closer he only felt a chill. Li Yunxin nodded to him. "Hello, Fifth General. I have a question for you. Why do you look so normal?" Except for Lu Laodao, few people could adapt to his style of speaking. This Yin spirit riding a big horse, who called himself the great general of the Jinwu guards of Dawei City, 5th Boyu, was no exception. This big ghost was like a real, sane person. He hesitated for a while and then cupped his hands on the horse, saying, "I didn't know you were Wei River Dragon King before, and I have offended you. My Majesty has already punished me. I am here to ask for forgiveness." He paused and then said, "I don't know, what does Dragon King mean by normal?" Li Yunxin couldn't help but laugh and pointed at him. "You see, this is normal. If I didn't look at you and didn't know your identity and only heard you speak, I really felt that you were a human. Logically speaking, you were only released after your Majesty returned to the throne. In your previous life, looking at you, you were first killed and then burned." "Indeed," the ghost of the great general of the Jinwu Guard said. But although his face was fierce, his expression was very calm, which made him look more like a human. "I guarded the front gate of the Golden Hall of the Coiled Dragon when I was alive. When Qing and I attacked, I killed countless people and the corpses piled up like a mountain. Later Qing and I used a crossbow to kill me. Later Qing Ni's Golden Hall killed the Emperor and burned the Purple Gold Palace, which is why I ended up like this." "So," Li Yunxin pointed at him, "Your Majesty is not normal. But you are clearly a ghost and you should have a very strong obsession. Why are you so normal?" "Dragon King, be careful with your words. Do not talk about the heavens. Your Majesty and I are friends of life and death. You won't be angry." Li Yunxin waved his hand and looked toward the calligraphy shop across the street. The window was pushed open a crack and the person inside was looking out. He seemed to have heard Li Yunxin speak on the other side of the street. "Diwu Bo, you should have been a loyal and honest person when he was alive, and he was still so in death." After being cut off by Li Yunxin, he was silent for a while. But in the end, he avoided the topic and continued, "I fought to the death and was the last person to die for the country in front of His Majesty. The fall of the Great Yi was not His Majesty's fault, nor was it a crime of war, nor was it my fault. I was loyal to my duty and there was nothing I could not let go of. Thus I did not have any obsession." What a rare person of understanding. Li Yunxin clapped his hands and stood up. His white robe was more conspicuous in the night. At this time, with the moonlight and the faint light from the calligraphy shop across the street, the person behind the window could see him clearly. "Okay, let's get down to business." He rubbed his hands. "Your Majesty has returned to the throne. I think the old ghosts near the city of Wei are all under his control. How is the investigation of those two matters?" Speaking of business, this general of the Golden Guards of the previous dynasty became even more serious. He still didn't get off the horse and only said, "Reporting to Dragon King. After all, it hasn't been long, so the information we got is limited. But according to the registered Yin gods attached to the inner gate, the stove, the statues, and the places where the Yin and Yang Qi converged, as well as the wandering ghosts with Taoism in the city and the ownerless monsters outside the city, according to the information from the investigation. First, the daughter of Lord Dongting, Hong Yangzi, does have the means to mobilize some Yin gods in the city. Dragon King previously speculated that it was the Yin gods in the city who stole the slough of the female Taoist. I think now I can be sure. A few days ago His Majesty sent someone to investigate secretly. Now all the Yin gods that Hong Yangzi can use have been recorded. Well done." Li Yunxin praised with a smile. He paused and looked at the people in the shop across the street. He tapped his palm with the folding fan and shook his head slightly. "Lord Dongting, that old guy is really cruel. That Qing Liangzi told me that he and his pure-blooded relatives can't go out of Dongting because of some things. So he wants to get his daughter. First, she destroys her personal ability and becomes a red carp. Then she is killed and becomes a ghost to recultivate so that she can leave Dongting and run around for him. I don't know if Hong Yangzi knows about this." "So, Lord Dongting knows what happened in the city of Wei these days?" "He only knows what Dragon King wants him to know." Diwu Boyu said respectfully, "The daughter of Lord Dongting only controls dozens of wandering ghosts, and they are all under the control of His Majesty." Good. Li Yunxin gently clapped his hands. What about the second one? Chapter 156. Secondly, it's about the beast from the Li Kingdom. Diwu Boyu paused slightly. It's only been an afternoon, time was tight after all, so I didn't get any valuable information. Li Yunxin sighed. It's been hard on you. I can understand. Tell me what you've heard. Yes. In the afternoon I captured some souls from outside the city. Some from the Fu Kingdom, some from the Li Kingdom. They've been dead for more than 10 days and their minds aren't very clear. I don't know why they weren't seduced by the Yama King. After asking carefully, I found out it wasn't a beast. It's about the Li Kingdom's emperor. This second took a little longer to explain. Li Yunxin listened quietly, waiting for Diwu Boyu to tell him everything he knew. He stared at the ghost of the Jin Wu guards for a while, not saying a word. The ghost general felt a little uncomfortable under his stare, cupping his hands. Dragon King, please forgive me, time is really tight, plus, I like you too much. Why don't you come and help me? Li Yunxin shook his head, letting out a long breath. Your information isn't worthless, it's too valuable. If you come and work for me when I become the king of Shinryu, I'll give you the title of Fubo Great General. How about it? Commanding 100,000 people of my Wei River, isn't that cool? Diwu Boyu solemnly saluted. Dragon King, please don't make fun of me like this. I'm loyal to His Majesty, I won't be disloyal. Li Yunxin sighed with regret. She counted on her fingers and scolded. Your Majesty is clearly not as handsome as I am, nor is he as smart as I am. Yet he has such an efficient, low-key and loyal general like you. My subordinates are so amusing. I forget it. We'll talk about this later. He was silent for a while, then another, pacing back and forth, his expression slowly becoming solemn. He was digesting the information Diwu Boyu gave him. Although it wasn't as detailed as what Yunzi knew, the combination of words like Emperor of Heaven, Power of Will, Cultivator, and Hatred was enough for him to infer the information he wanted to know. Last night he used the 9 Heavens Thunder Fire to kill Qing Liangji. Originally Lin Luoran planned to see Yunzi's reaction and lead the trouble to Dong Ting. Who knew that Yunzi's reaction was beyond his expectations. It was as if he was frightened. He vaguely guessed some things but he wasn't sure. Until today when he saw that Yunzi had not taken any action, he felt that something was wrong. And now, after listening to what Diwu Boyu had said, he finally couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It seemed that good fortune was really looking after him from the unseen world. It allowed him to hear about the calamity that Chen Sanyang had mentioned, and pay attention to investigate, and even let this ghost general investigate. He killed Qing Liangji, it was an impromptu move. From the looks of it, it was the right time to kill them. If his guess was correct, if that Yunzi was indeed an intelligent person, the kind of intelligent person who was far more intelligent than the average intelligent person, at this moment he would suspect that the one who killed Liangzi last night was Long's son. However, it was not the 9th dragon's son but the 2nd son, Hatred. Smart people all have a common characteristic, they think too much. Only by thinking too much would one notice more clues and be able to understand the general trend from a small clue. For example, under the known premises of Qi Wen is dead, Qing Liangji was killed by the 9 Heavens Thunder Fire, only dragons have this ability, dragon cult, and Hatred is seriously injured. Smart and bold strategists will infer an amazing possibility. It was the 2nd son, Hatred, who killed Qing Liangji that night. The 2nd son, Hatred, was seriously injured. He knew that he had made too many enemies in daily life, so he fled to the waters under the jurisdiction of his 9th son. After all, there was the power of the divine dragon here. Ordinary demons were not willing to occupy this not-so-vast water, nor were they willing to provoke the wrath of the divine dragon. Then he found that his 9th brother was killed, and there were strong enemies lying in wait. So he colluded with that Lord Dong Ting and followed that old thing's plan to create a dragon cult, so as to absorb some incense and wish power. The dragon cult worshipped Dragon Son Qi Wen, and Hatred also had to take up the name of Dragon Son. Li Yunxin thought for a while on the spot and raised his head to look at Diwu Boyu. His heart moved and he told him all these ideas. The ghost general had some difficulty listening, so Li Yunxin stopped and explained some key points to him. After explaining everything clearly, he asked him, "What do you think after hearing what I said?" The ghost general was silent for a while. The Dragon King has deep plans and foresight. But, ordinary people may not think like the Dragon King. Ordinary people will have doubts and will want to solve the problem. However, the direction of this consideration will also rely on common sense as much as possible, and not a strange plan. After all, this deduction of the Dragon King is somewhat one-sided. Li Yunxin shrugged. If you were Yunzi, what would you think? The ghost general was silent for a long time this time. In the end he said honestly, this general can't think of anything. I can only ask around and try my luck or have a good talk with that Lord Dongting. Or, directly destroy the dragon cult. Li Yunxin curled his lips. Asking around will expose you to the enemy's vision, and you will be killed by them. Have a good talk with Lord Dongting? How do you know that all this is not because the other party wants you to do this, so they came up with this to force you to submit? Directly destroy the dragon cult? Humph, stupid to the extreme. This method. At this point, Li Yunxin was stunned. After a while, he clapped his hands. I said I like you. He felt that his brain had been enlightened. The original plan was to lead Lord Dongting Yunzi and Bai Yunxin into a three-way fight. However, the death of the emperor of the Li Kingdom tens of thousands of miles away had disrupted his plan. But because of this ghost General Diwu Bo Yu's words, he felt that he had some other plans. So his mood improved a little. With a swipe of his hand on the fan, he took out a green plum out of nowhere and took a bite. The ghost general stood in the night like a black iron statue. Seeing him like this, he hesitated for a while and asked, if it's sour, why do you still eat it? Because the mouth has no taste. Li Yunxin thought for a while, then asked, what's the third matter? Because of this sentence, Diwu Bo Yu's face showed a strange expression. He seemed to want to express something, but because of his identity and the situation, he had to be careful with his words. He only said, His Majesty's matters. This general can't ask. If there's a result, I think His Majesty will tell the Dragon King. After a pause he said, this general will be bold to say something that deserves to die 10,000 times. My Yi kingdom died because of that witch. Now His Majesty and that witch. Li Yunxin shook his head and smiled. That's not what you think. What do you mean died because of a witch? Your head is full of futile thoughts. If your Yi kingdom was rich and the people were strong, then even if all the officials started to court death, they could still do it for decades or even centuries. Don't find excuses for yourself and throw the blame on the girl. Forget it, I won't fight for this. I still have something to do with that person, you can leave first. The general of the Golden Guard still didn't seem to agree with what Li Yunxin said, but he had already walked straight to the other end of the street. He sighed like a human, and the warhorse silently moved its four hooves, sliding straight into the night. Li Yunxin walked 5 or 6 steps away from the pen and calligraphy shop, and the window that had been opened a crack was closed. He didn't care and walked straight to the window, reaching out his hand and knocking on the windowsill. There was some sound in the room, but it immediately went silent. After a while, Li Yunxin knocked again. Then the person in the room said, It's closed. I don't want to buy your things, but I want to give you something. He leaned against the window and said unhurriedly, I have a direct guide to divine grade elixirs from the Shanqing alchemy cauldron in the city. Do you want to read it? Suddenly there was a crash in the room as if something was knocked down again. After a while, the person in the room asked, Who are you? I don't know you. What do you want? Li Yunxin didn't say anything. The person was also silent for a while, as if it was uncomfortable to hold it in, but his tone softened. I heard you talking to yourself on the other side. Are you crazy? I know you're the son-in-law of the Yu family, but you're not successful. Your wife is the daughter of a concubine from the 4th branch of the Yu family. Her appearance and temperament aren't good, so she married you. Li Yunxin played with the green plum in his hand and said slowly, You're a scholar, but you don't read well. You don't have a brain for business, and you're thin-skinned and not good at socializing, so you don't need the resources and connections of the Yu family. But you see those people in the Yu family, in your eyes they have no ambition and bad character, but they live happily, so you feel more and more indignant. You always want to do something different to show those people, so that the master of the Yu family will look favorably upon you. The person in the room was frightened. Who are you? I don't have gold or silver here, and neither do my family. My family? Yes, your family is so poor that your wife has to use jewelry as a dowry. As far as I know, the day before yesterday, your wife sent away 2 of her maids, and only kept the girl who came with her. Li Yunxin said slowly, You didn't go home for a few days and only did those lead mercury arts here. You're not a disciple of the Shangqing Danding sect, and you only play by yourself. Do you think you're better at alchemy than others? What's more, you've made all the money in this shop for nothing, and your child at home is crying from hunger. Brother Wang, you're a failure as a person. The person in the room suddenly opened the window and stuck his head out. It was a scholar in his 20s, but because he had been smoking for a long time, His face looked slightly older. His hair was unkempt and he didn't know how long he hadn't left the room. But Li Yunxin had already gone to the roof. This scholar looked left and right and couldn't find him. He only whispered angrily, "Who are you? Why do you care about my family's business? What do you know? Do you know what I'm doing? What I want to make isn't those ordinary pills." Li Yunxin sat on the roof and said leisurely, "I know this too. You don't make pills but you make gunpowder. If you ask me, the name, gunpowder, isn't good, why not just call it gunpowder? But you've been refining for so long, do you know what the Taoists of the Shanqing Danding sect use? It's just a waste of effort." Wang Sheng heard the sound coming from the roof, but he didn't dare to stick his head out to look. He gritted his teeth and thought for a while, then went back to the room and took a short bamboo stick out of nowhere. He hid in the window and poked at the roof. As he poked, he said, "Why do you care about me? Why do you care about me? Where did this lunatic come from? Hey, how do you know I don't know the formula? It's just sulfur and charcoal, humph, ayah." He poked at Li Yunxin, but he didn't manage to poke him. Instead, he poked a piece of green tile. The tile fell down and hit his wrist and the mud got into his eyes. Wang Sheng was in so much pain that he dropped the bamboo stick and held his hand, breathing heavily. He opened his eyelids and blew at his eyeballs, tears and snot flowing down. He heard the person on the roof say calmly, "Ayah, you actually know this. But you only know sulfur and charcoal. Do you know the ratio? How much salt, how much sulfur, how much charcoal?" Wang Sheng held his wrist and said angrily, "Don't tell me you know." But no one replied. He rubbed his wrist a few more times as if he had just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't tell me you know. Quickly tell me, I. Since you've carefully investigated my wife and concubine, I'll give my concubine to you." After shouting like this for a while, the voice on the roof came again, "Why would I want your fated wife? Listen carefully, I'm only going to say it once. My gunpowder is black, it's called black powder. As for the ratio, it's 7.5. 15% salt, 20% sulfur, 30% charcoal. Mix it according to this ratio and then use a mallet to make it thinner and then, forget it, you should know all this. In this way you can get the black powder." Wang Xing didn't dare to breathe loudly. He stared with his eyes wide open and memorized it. He recited it a few times in his heart, touched something and quickly drew it on the ground, then asked, "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" The person on the roof was silent for a while, then said, "I know you're despised by the Yu family and you're depressed and you hate those snobs. As for me, I also have a grudge against the Yu family. You want to ask me who I am? Have I heard of the Qian family fort?" Wang Sheng was stunned for a while, then slightly frowned and was shocked. You're from the Qian family fort? Isn't that the richest family in the martial arts world of the Daqing state? Then it was destroyed by the Eagle Castle?" Li Yunxin sat on the roof, silently shrugging his shoulders. It seemed that Qin Sanyang wasn't bluffing, the Qin family fort was indeed famous. He then said with hatred expressionless, "Yes. It's the Qin family fort. The Qin family fort was destroyed, but the people of the Qin family fort can't be killed completely. We originally came to the city of Wei to settle down and open an escort agency. Who knew that the agency would be framed by the Yu family and the big escort company, and now it can't continue. We'll leave the city of Wei tonight. But I think before I leave, I can't let the Yu family live too comfortably. I've been observing you for a few days, and I know you're not willing to be a vassal of the Yu family, so I'll give you a chance to advance. In a few days there will be an opportunity for you to show your talents. At that time, sigh." Li Yunxin pretended to sigh. "You've obtained wealth and power, but don't forget the disdain you've suffered from the Yu family today, and don't forget that it was the Qin family who gave you this wealth. I'm going." Then he really went. Chapter 157. But what he said before was just nonsense. He didn't expect that Wang Xing would be able to come up with something incredible with just a few words from him. The power of gunpowder was limited after all, and it was related to many other technologies. It didn't mean that you could enter the era of gunpowder just by knowing the ratio. And it was hard to say whether the raw materials in Wang Xing's hands were useful or not. But Li Yunxin didn't need to see any results. He just wanted to make a mark on the road and bury something. If there was a chance or if something really happened as he imagined, the bait would work. He walked on the street of Wei City and couldn't help looking up at the night sky. What a familiar night sky, only a few familiar stars were missing. The history of this world was at least a written history, it had been nearly 30,000 years. But something was not quite right. at least according to his experience. It was getting more and more interesting. He walked through the streets of Wei City at night, and even went to the Shaohun street that he destroyed last night to have a look. It was easy to see ghosts when walking at night, but for him, it was ghosts looking for him. After a while, he turned around on the street. "What's up?" A woman in a black palace dress with a butterfly wing bun walked out from the shadow and said softly, "Your Majesty has good hearing. The police officer is about to pay his respects to you." "It's you." "I thought you were a pheasant." Li Yunxin looked at her up and down. After sizing her up for a while, she smiled. "You're such a beauty in your human form. I couldn't tell when you were a cat, but looking at your facial features now, could it be that your ancestors are Persian cats?" The woman in black, who was named Warning by Li Yunxin, bowed her head slightly and smiled. "Your Majesty, I am a cat girl." Cat Slave was originally a monster that didn't understand human affairs, so how would she know about the bloodline of her ancestors? "Fortunately, Your Majesty taught me the right way of cultivation, and now I have a human form. Your Majesty likes it, and that's my blessing. If Your Majesty—" She moved closer to Li Yunxin while talking. Li Yun put up a finger. "Don't stick to me. I'm still a child at this age. But, don't say his name like that in the future. Seeing that you are a beauty, Chief Sergeant, always makes me feel like there's a drama going on." The cat demon stopped in her tracks and said, "As you wish, Your Majesty." Li Yunxin thought for a moment and said, "I know that there's a police ferry in the Red Tower. From now on, you should address him as Sheriff Chang. That's what it means to be a long-term warning." The cat demon raised her head and smiled shyly and happily. "Yes, Cat Slave will be called Sheriff from now on. So, what business do you have with me?" The black cat replied, "Replying to Your Majesty." According to His Majesty's orders, the four of us, as well as the young lady of the Qiao clan, possessed the clay figurine that was being worshipped to absorb the power of will and cultivate Dao techniques. Apart from Miss Qiao, who is still muddle-headed due to the long delay, the four of us have already begun to mature a few days ago. Recently, the four of us have been acting according to the king's orders. We've been doing some miraculous things. The villagers near the Egret continent have all become our dragon cult's followers. We've also followed his orders. Those who don't believe in gossip, we won't make things difficult for them. His Majesty once told Mrs. Sanhua that once the weather near the Egret continent is right, they should come to the city of Wei. So Mrs. Sanhua sent me to ask my Majesty, what should we do next? Li Yunxin listened to her words and felt quite surprised. This little cat was articulate and quick-witted like a real person. No wonder Sanhua didn't say it herself but asked her to. Even Sanhua didn't speak as cleanly as her. He previously sighed that Diwu Boyu was calm and experienced in doing things, but now it seemed, this little cat also had potential. But that's all in the future. Li Yunxin asked again, "How is Daoist Lu?" Replying to Your Majesty. Daoist Lu has been cultivating hard recently. His cultivation is the highest. He has already broken through the state of mind. Li Yunxin exclaimed in surprise. Although the lower the state of cultivation, the easier it was to improve, and that Lu Laodao had a good foundation. Plus Shirquizi also said that Lu Laodao's talent was very good. But Li Yunxin didn't expect it to be this good. From the time he taught Lu Laodao the water cloud force until now, it's only been 2 months. And he has already broken through the state of mind. He himself was a genius among geniuses, but from cultivating Dao to breaking through the state of mind, it still took him half a year. What the hell? Luckily he had already taken over Dragon Sun's body, and was cultivating Shin Dao and painting Dao. Under the situation where he had enough power of will, the speed of improvement wasn't something a human cultivator could compare with. Otherwise, as a teacher he would be surpassed by an older disciple. Where would he still have face? But thinking that old Lu, who had been depressed for almost his entire life, finally had a chance to shine, Li Yunxin still felt a little more carefree. That Taoist Lu was experienced in the ways of the world, and his early experiences were also extraordinary. Previously he was a yes-man and a calculative person in the streets, but that was because the world of mortals had buried his edge and sharpness. Now that he had received the true teachings of Tao and once again revealed his outstanding talent, he might just be the second fifth Earl. Li Yunxin used the folding fan to knock on his palm and smiled, "Good, good, good. I've already set up this Wei City, it's time to enter the city to work. But there's no rush, I still have some things to settle, wait for my news. You go back first. These few days, if some strange people sneak into Egret State to scout for information, don't touch them. I'll take care of them after I finish my work." The black cat nodded and said softly, "I'll follow your orders, my king." Then let's go back, Li Yunxin said and rose up like the wind, and in a blink of an eye he was several miles away. In the morning he had already appeared in Egret State's Sanheku Dragon King Temple. According to his orders, the people of the dragon cult did not touch the Dragon King Temple. But the temple devotee of this temple, Kuan Yangzi, was killed by the master he worshipped, and his soul was refined into a soul bell, so he couldn't find a temple devotee to replace him. There were originally 2 boys in the temple, but the day after their master died, they ran away with the money left behind by Kuan Yangzi, as well as the gold and silver candlesticks worshipped in the temple. Thus, the Dragon King Temple became deserted. Occasionally people from Wei City or other places would come to pay their respects. But now that the temple was almost empty, they did not have the thought to come again. After a while, until today when Li Yunxin entered the temple, the first thing he saw was salted fish drying on the ground. When this Dragon King Temple was first built, a lot of effort was put into it. The ground in the courtyard was made of flat large green stones. Even after all these years, it was still better than other places. It was like calling a monk bald in front of a monk. The person drying the fish definitely did not know that the current owner of the temple was a salted fish. He went straight through the courtyard to the main hall, and saw that the incense table was empty, except for an angry statue of the Dragon King. He sensed it. It seemed that the spiritual power was still there. So he called softly, Red Madam, I have something to say to you." After a few words there was no response. So Li Yunxin walked out of the temple, and sat in the wooden pavilion where he met her last time. He waited for a whole day. He saw the sun slowly set behind the mountains, the heat on the ground gradually disappeared, and the birds returned to their nests. He saw the bright moon rising from the west, the bright stars in the sky and the Milky Way in the sky. Red Madam had not come yet. Li Yunxin was not in a hurry and waited patiently. He waited for 4 hours until the second watch period. Finally he saw a little candle light rising from the water. He stood up and saw Red Madam with a red lantern in her hand. She looked as pretty as the last time he saw her, but she did not look good. This was what Li Yunxin felt. In fact, Red Madam was still forcing a smile on her face. She was pushed into the pavilion by the water under her feet, and then said, "We met the day before yesterday, why did you call me again?" Her tone was not happy or even polite. It seemed that she did not want to see Li Yunxin. This was completely different from her appearance 2 days ago. However, Li Yunxin only solemnly bowed to Hong Yangzi. "Hong Yangzi, do you know of an earth-shattering news? The Emperor of the Li Kingdom, alas. I knew it was because of this matter that you came." Red Madam sighed and sat back on the railing she was sitting on before. She looked at Li Yunxin for a while and then said, "What kind of person are you? You should know, the things in the city of Wei and the Wei River are not things you can get involved in." Red Madam's expression kept changing in the candlelight. "You want to avenge your friend and you wander around. But in fact, many things will happen whether you do it or not. I heard that you pretended to be a disciple of the dragon cult on the street in the city of Wei, and wanted to ruin the reputation of the dragon cult. That night, some people fought in the city of Wei and even triggered the 9 heavens thunder and fire. Are you really not afraid?" Something happened. Li Yunxin's heart skipped a beat. No matter from Red Madam's tone or behavior, it meant that something had happened. These things changed the attitude of the demon within 2 days, which was probably the reason why she came late. But it was a good thing. He contacted with Red Madam to find out the situation on the side of Lord Dongting. Lord Dongting was a 3,000-year-old great demon, and he was astute. He looked like an ordinary human being, but that was because he didn't care. The great demon was powerful and many things could be solved with the word kill, so he didn't care about other details. For example, that night in Mount June. So he tried to save the country in a roundabout way, and now it seemed that this was the right way. Red Madam's mood seemed to be unstable tonight, which was an excellent starting point. Li Yunxin frowned slightly. "So you know, Red Madam, although I'm just a Yin spirit with low cultivation, I know something about the general trend. Daotong and Kenzo have lost 5 cultivators with great magical powers, and they were injured by us Yin spirits, so they won't let it go. And Lu Ling died by the Dongting Lake. Daotong will definitely take this as an excuse to launch an attack. If we don't make a plan and take action earlier." Red Madam suddenly frowned and scolded him in a delicate voice. "Why do you care so much?" Hearing her words, Li Yunxin was really stunned. Then he wondered, "Red Madam, you..." The carp monster sighed and closed her eyes slightly, ignoring him. She closed her eyes and ignored him. She seemed to be thinking of something before she opened them again and said in a low voice, I will take you to see someone." She jumped down from the railing and walked to Li Yunxin with the lantern in her hand. Then she raised the lantern to illuminate his face and looked at him carefully for a while. Since I can't persuade you, I will take you to see that person. But if you promise me that you will no longer care about the city of Wei and Weishui River, and leave here to be a free ghost cultivator, you still have a chance. Red Madam, you? Li Yunxin also looked at her. But he found that this female monster's eyes were moving as if she wanted to stare at him, but because of some other things she always wanted to look away. So he smiled in his heart and guessed a possibility. He said, I will go with you. Red Madam sighed, turned around and walked a few steps into the lake. A wave came out of the water and supported her. You come. Red Madam said. But Li Yunxin stared at the wave for a long time, but he didn't move his feet. He frowned. Is there no other way? Are you going to the water? Red Madam turned around and smiled as if she was trying to find joy in the midst of bitterness. Are you actually afraid of water? Li Yunxin spread out his hands awkwardly. Well, I'm a little afraid. So is there. But before he finished his words, Red Madam had turned around and rushed to him, holding his arm with both hands. For a moment, the spiritual power in Li Yunxin's body surged and his muscles tightened. He almost flew back and killed her. But Red Madam just hugged his arm. Her full breasts pressed against his side, and her cherry lips whispered in his ear, Then I will take you away. She was a ghost cultivator, so she didn't need to breathe. If she didn't deliberately use magic, her body would be cold. But at this moment, Li Yunxin was caught off guard by her, and his heart was still shaken. He pretended to pull his arm out and said, Red Madam, you have? But Red Madam ignored him. Pulling him along, she leapt up onto the wave platform. Then the sound of the waves and the wind rose in their ears. They were carried by the waves and went straight to the center of the lake. At this time, Li Yunxin really didn't struggle anymore. He just tightly pursed his lips and stared at the jade-like waves under his feet without saying a word. The Dongting was 1,000 miles away. After a quarter of an hour they got out of the Sanhiku, and the mountains on both sides were gone. At this moment, the Dongting was like a boundless sea with no end in sight. Only the brilliant Milky Way above their heads cast a cold light, reflecting on the lake. Red Madam didn't speak, just staring at Li Yunxin's side face. Her eyes were sometimes filled with tenderness, sometimes filled with sorrow and guilt, and sometimes filled with apprehension. She just hugged Li Yunxin's arm and clung to it. But she didn't seem to be seducing him, but just satisfying him. What was in her mind? After another quarter of an hour, Red Madam sighed in a low voice, Li, since you are afraid of water, I won't scare you anymore. After saying that, she waved her hand, and the jade-like waves under her feet turned into a white jade-like boat, carrying them to the lake. Red Madam let go of Li Yunxin's arm, walked to the end of the boat and sat down. She hugged her knees as if she was afraid of the cold and put her chin on them. Then she smiled slightly and silently watched Li Yunxin take a deep breath and sit down on the other end of the boat. Then she asked softly, Li, you just said that I have. You mean that I have been a wife? Do you care about this very much? Chapter 158. Then she sees the man on the other side of the boat is slightly stunned. He stares straight at her as if he is guessing what she is thinking. Red Lady doesn't say anything. She just slightly tightens her arms. It seems that she can protect herself better in this way so that people can't see through her. But she still stares at Li Yunxin. After half a day, she heard her husband say in a low voice, You have refused me. I only think about my brother's revenge now. He glanced at Red Lady but very quickly avoided her line of sight. Love affair. Who doesn't have love affair? It's not right to think about it now. You still care about it? Red Lady sighs slightly but her voice soon goes away with the wind. How can anyone know what I want? In fact, what I want is so simple. She turns her eyes away and pats on the side of the boat with one hand. Then the boat stops. At this moment, the two have been rushing into Dongting Lake for 3/4 of an hour. Looking up, there is only the night sky around them. The boat and Dongting seem to be packed in a bucket with the sky as the wall. The sky is engraved with clouds that are silvered by the moonlight. The brilliant sea of stars is inverted over their heads and reflected on Dongting. The sky is boundless, but the boat is lonely. Since the boat stops, the wind and waves also stop. Red Lady stands up and stands at the bow of the boat. She glances at the vast Dongting Lake and says faintly, Look at this Dongting that is thousands of miles long. For mortals, it is boundless and magnificent. But in my eyes and my father's eyes, it is just a cage. This Dongting has a radius of thousands of miles, almost like an ocean. But my father's real body is thousands of feet long. He shows his real body, but he can't even swim in this Dongting. My father was born in this Dongting. He attained the Tao 3,000 years ago and was trapped in this lake 2,000 years ago. Although I haven't lived long, I can understand my father's pain. He felt sorry for the marine animals in this lake. He hasn't shown his real body for thousands of years. The sentence you used to say to me the most was, "If I can swim in the vast ocean, I will have no regrets in this life." Li Yunxin remained silent. With both hands supporting himself on the ship's railing, he looked at Red Madam with her back facing him. In the dim light of the night she looked like a fairy on the lake. He knew one thing in his heart. When humans and demons died, their souls would remain. His soul was incomplete and he had lost his mind. Even if he were to become a ghostly cultivator in the future, he would still have an obsession. According to his own words, the great general of the Golden Guards of the previous dynasty, the fifth Boyu, when he died, he did not have any attachments in his heart, so he did not have any obsessions. It was just his own wishful thinking. His obsession was definitely there, but neither he nor Li Yunxin had noticed it yet. Red Madam was no exception. She must also have an obsession. Obsession was the greatest weakness of ghostly cultivators. Obsession would cause them to lose their basic judgment when facing many things. Once something related to that obsession appeared, their attention would immediately be drawn to it and they would become muddle-headed. If it was really possible to die without any worries and obsessions, then why the hell would a human cultivator cultivate longevity? It was better for them to all die and cultivate the divine Tao. Before, Li Yunxin couldn't see Red Madam's obsession. She was too much like an ordinary woman, except for the cruelty shared by some demons. But in Li Yunxin's eyes, this kind of cruelty, a woman lovingly looked at her children playing in the yard and whispered something to her mother-in-law while cutting off the head of a rooster. Wasn't this as cruel as a demon? Therefore, Red Madam was still very normal. However, now Li Yunxin thinks that he gradually knows where her obsession is. Therefore, he just listens to the woman in red quietly in the sound of water and above the Dongting in the night. Do you know how I offended your friend? Red Madam turns around and smiles slightly. Before that, I was just a red carp who achieved the Tao. My mother was a human, but I was born with the inheritance of my father. I was born with a monster body of the emptiness realm. In this Dongting, no one dares to disobey me. Although I am useless, I also know how powerful Dragon Sun is. He is a big demon who is close to the true realm and he has a dragon body. How could I go to Weishui River to provoke him? And even if I want to go to Weishui River, I can't get out. My father was imprisoned in Dongting. I have his bloodline, so I was also imprisoned. So I said that this big Dongting is just a cage. Li Yunxin thinks for a while and asks softly, "Who has such a great ability?" "I can't tell you now." Red Madam smiles slightly. She looks at Li Yunxin more and more softly. She is completely different from the woman 2 days ago. Therefore, in fact, it was my father who asked me to provoke Dragon Sun deliberately. On the other hand, I've stayed in Dongting for 200 years, and I can't even leave the lakeside. I really want to take a look at Egret Town and see if those fellows called humans are really alive like in the stories my father told me. So my personal ability was abolished by Dragon Sun and I became a red carp. I suffered a little, but I finally became a ghost cultivator. I didn't know if I could really bypass the inhibition by doing this, but now it seems that I have succeeded. When I become a ghost cultivator, I can leave Dongting, go to the Egret Town, and do something for my father. Red Madam smiles and looks at Li Yunxin. But you should know that we ghost cultivators all have obsessions. My obsessions are the revenge of your brother. Or in other words, the obsessions are love. And my obsessions. Speaking of this, Red Madam slowly sits down. She kicks a pair of embroidered shoes into the water with just a kick. A pair of snow-white and smooth feet dip into the lake and stir gently. The water rippled outwards. Red Madam stares at the water for a while. She puts her hands on the side of the boat, leans back slightly and turns to look at Li Yunxin. When I was a demon, I often listened to a person reading by the lake. I listened to the sound of his reading. The sound of reading is very pleasant to hear. Li Yunxin, did you study before you died? Li Yunxin's eyes and voice are gentle. He smiles lightly. My parents died and my family was poor. I only studied elementary school and the meaning of words before I died. I never read classics and history. I can't understand what you said. But it's very pleasant to hear. Red Madam smiles slightly. In the past, Duxing also said some pleasant words that I didn't understand, but now he doesn't remember. He is immortal after all. After becoming a ghost, he is more confused. Then, Li Yunxin, can you write poems? Li Yunxin shakes his head and smiles. I can copy poems. Red Madam blinks happily. At least at this time she looks like a real beautiful girl. Li Yunxin, copy one for me. Okay. Li Yunxin closes his eyes and takes a deep breath of the dense water vapor above Dongting. Then he murmurs, the west wind blows the old Dongting waves. One night Xiangjuan has many white hairs. After getting drunk, I don't know, the sky is still water. A boat full of clear dreams covers the Milky Way. He reads this poem in ancient rhyme, long and sad. After reading this poem, Red Madam doesn't speak. She stares at the water and then closes her eyes again. After a long silence, she turns her head and smiles at Li Yunxin. It's really nice. Li Yunxin, who is Xiangjuan? Li Yunxin smiles gently and knocks his palm with the folding fan in his hand. Look at my fan. I bought it from a street shop in the city of Wei. Are there spots on the bone like tears? Red Madam stares at it carefully with her beautiful eyes and says yes. So the bone of the fan is made of tear bamboo. It is said that a long time ago there was a human emperor called Emperor Shun. There was also a river called Xiangjiang River. There was a monster in Xiangjiang River who often harmed people. So Emperor Shun went to Xiangjiang River to kill the monster. His two wives waited for him for a long time, but he didn't come back, so they went to Xiangjiang River to find him. But they found out that after Emperor Shun killed the monster, he also died. Emperor Shun's two wives cried bitterly and their tears splashed on the bamboo, forming this tear bamboo. And Heaven Emperor remembered Emperor Shun's merits and conferred him the title of Xiangjiang River God, Xiangjuan. Ah, my father is Lord Dongting. Red Madam sighs. Then Li Yunxin, do you want to be the Wei River God? Li Yunxin's eyelashes tremble slightly. The moment he heard the last sentence, dozens of thoughts flashed through his mind. He quickly grabbed a few but let go of all of them. Finally, he exhales lightly and smiles calmly. I have never thought that far. Red Madam is silent for a while and also smiles. So I like to listen to people reading poems. After listening to it for a long time, I can understand some things. For example, when I knew that Li Yunxin was reading this poem, I was not happy at all and felt a lot of emotions. My father felt that he owed me and wanted to make it up to me. I love that world, I love the way men and women are together, so my father wanted Du Sheng to accompany me. Red Madam looks at the ripples in the lake. I used to listen to people reading by the lake, it was him. But he has completely changed. He is muddle-headed and only says one sentence all day long. Li Yunxin is more beautiful than him and speaks more eloquently than him. The first time I saw Li Yunxin, actually, I liked him. Red Madam looks at Li Yunxin again, her eyes calm and clear. And Li Yunxin also looks at her. But, Red Madam, a few days ago, because at that time, although I loved you, I could not bear to see you suffer, and I was afraid that my father would not allow me. Red Madam looks at him, but now my father told me that since I like him, there is no harm in accepting him. Oh, my obsession. But, Li Yunxin sighs in his heart. He knows this Red Madam's obsession. I want someone to love me well. Red Madam's long eyelashes are slightly lowered and she says softly, I told you before that it is not too late to be a free ghost cultivator. Now, I tell you again, my father is imprisoned in Dongting Lake and he can't get out. You want my father to go to the city of Wei to avenge your friend, but it is impossible. You can only wait for a long time, maybe there will be a chance. Now that you know this, I ask you again, are you still not leaving? Li Yunxin is silent for a while. No. He doesn't leave because he wants to confirm something or someone. He also thinks this is a good opportunity to understand Lord Dongting. If Red Madam really takes him to Lord Dongting's lair, he would then be able to know more and lay out his plans even more meticulously. Lord Dongting may be a great demon, but he is not a ghost cultivator. Li Yunxin with a low realm. These days the dragon cult has been quite powerful. Plus, he caused the ninth heaven thunder and fire in the battle in the city of Wei the night before. People in the city of Wei remember the storm caused by the ninth young master in the city of Wei, and they all say, Wei River Dragon King showed his divinity again. Therefore he has broken through the emptiness realm and returned to the transcendent realm. As long as Lord Dongting can't see through him for a while, even if he is on guard against him and doesn't use his full strength, he can protect himself and escape at any time. So, don't leave. Red Madam seems to know that he will answer like this. She stares at him for a while, and suddenly her eyes are covered with a layer of mist. You are so determined. A smile bloomed on her lips. You love me too. You are so different. Li Yunxin sighs slightly. He knew that Hong Yangzi's obsession had taken over her mind. But before he could think about the deeper meaning behind the sentence, "You guys are so different," he saw Red Lady suddenly raise her hand under the moonlight, revealing her snow-white and smooth forearm. Then her slender fingers dance gently like water waves. Her voice is clear and graceful, and she murmurs a strange song. A gentleman does not know the time when he will serve. The sun is setting. Muyun roars. She sings these 4 lines 3 times. Then she turns her head and whispers to Li Yunxin with a smile, "Li, she is here." So the Dongting Lake, it is boiling. Clouds. Big groups of clouds. Big groups of snow-white, thick clouds rise from the water not far from them. They are like thick fog and also like clouds of smoke. Every time a bubble rises from the bottom of the water and bursts on the surface of the water, a cloud of white gas is released. Then the cloud slowly rises and stays in the air for dozens of meters, and is silvered by the moonlight. Suddenly, it becomes a dreamy fairy tale-like world. It seems that the sky above their heads is full of big cotton candy, and then some white 4-legged animals rise from the water. When those white animals come to the water seems to become hard ground. Hundreds of these animals are slowly walking back and forth in the water in front of them, and the clouds floating in the sky are slowly rising from their heads. Li Yunxin gently takes a breath and gently exhales. At a distance of 100 meters, ordinary people can't see it clearly. But he can see it clearly. Those animals are people. Hundreds of fair and plump people, naked, walked slowly on the surface of the water on all 4s. White mist rises from their eyes, ears, mouths and noses, and finally converges into those clouds in the air. Those clouds, they are Yangqi in essence. Red Madam slightly squints, looking at the scene in the moonlight, and sighs in a low voice. "When I was young, I had troubles in my heart, so I came to see Muyun. It is said that immortals eat wind and drink dew, and demons also like it. But wind dew tastes bland and plain, while human yang is sweet and rich. When the moon is full, they come out of the white forest to Muyun. After a month they can harvest." Chapter 159. Red Lady stared at the distance for a while as if she was an ordinary girl looking at a beautiful scenery. Then she turned her head and smiled, "But you used to be a human, I think you don't like it." Li Yunxin smiled, "Yes, I don't like it. But I brought you here to see another person." After saying this, Red Lady put her arms on the side of the white jade boat. Then she floated up and landed in Li Yunxin's arms. Li Yunxin grabbed the side of the boat with both hands as if he wanted to hug her. Red Lady went straight into his arms but didn't do anything else. She gently stretched out her jade-like arms, with one hand wrapped around Li Yunxin's back and the other placed on his chest. Then she gently placed her head on his chest and gently said, "I brought Li Lang to see that Lu Ling." Like a kitten, Red Lady obediently curled up in his bosom. Li Yunxin was stunned for a while and kept silent for a while. He knew that 2 days ago this Red Madam told him that she was married and refused him because of her obsession. What she was doing now was also because of her obsession. Just a single thought could cause so much trouble. And she said, to bring him to see Lu Ling. Li Yunxin finally breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. The first time he met Song Yunzi in Mount Jun, he only said something big had happened. The body of Lu Ling stopped at the station of the Shanqing Danding sect in the city of Wei. He didn't guard it well and waited for the people from the Langya cave to come. Instead, he came to Mount Jun and said something big had happened. What big thing could it be? Then he met Red Lady for the first time and heard her say that the concubine married by the monarch's father was troublesome. Now the Taoists in the city of Wei are not willing to leave. He already had a vague inference. And now this inference was finally confirmed. In his bosom, Red Madam gently rubbed her face against his body, closed her eyes, and greedily inhaled a breath of Li Yunxin's breath. Then she raised her hand and pointed to the distance. "Look at the one standing in the crowd." Li Yunxin immediately looked over. Previously he couldn't see it clearly because he was shocked by the scene. Secondly, it was because the clouds rising from the 7 apertures of those animals had covered the figure. A figure dressed in white. That was Ling Kongzi, the head disciple of Langya Utopia's master. Li Yunxin let out a deep sigh. Red Madam hugged him tightly and stretched out her hand to pat the side of the ship. Thus, the white jade boat glided smoothly and silently. In the blink of an eye, it was only a few steps away from Ling Kongzi. Li Yunxin saw her clearly. Ling Kongzi. Her appearance had not changed, she was still shockingly beautiful. Even without any makeup on her face, with only the moonlight as a foundation, she still had a soul-stirring beauty. He was dressed in a plain white robe. There was a bell hanging on his left wrist, and a thin whip in his right hand. Their eyes met. Li Yunxin's eyes were clear and calm, while Ling Kongzi was slightly stunned, and then a surprised expression slowly appeared on her face. Then she blinked and slowly turned around. She first raised her left hand that was tied with the bell and pointed at Li Yunxin. After 2 breaths of time she murmured, "You didn't die?" Like in slow motion. It was as if her movements were half a beat slower than her thoughts, or like a mechanical puppet that could not operate smoothly. And Red Lady, like a lazy woman who had just woken up in the morning, slightly closed her eyes and gently rubbed her head in Li Yunxin's arms. Then she said in a low voice, "Right now Lu Ling is between life and death. His snow mountain and Qixi have collapsed, and his cultivation has been abolished. Normally he should be dead and his soul should leave his body. Unfortunately there is a treasure on her wrist, the soul-suppressing bell which took her soul away. Right now the soul is controlling the body through the bell. Speaking of which, if my father hadn't found this treasure and attached it to his body, this Lu Ling would have become a ghost cultivator. But now, he's not as agile as a mortal in the secular world." Li Yunxin quietly listened to Red Lady's words and calmly said, "So you asked her to come to Mu Yun?" At first she was arrogant. But she was always a smart person. My father said that taking her as a concubine was also willful, just to humiliate her. In fact she couldn't bear the torment now, she would really die. Red Lady lazily opened one eye and glanced at Lu Ling for a while. But I know what she's plotting. She's thinking that maybe someone from Daotong will come and save her. Li Yunxin said, "N." At this time, Lu Ling slowly opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say the second sentence. Li Yunxin looked at her and said, "Of course I'm not dead and we still have a good account to settle. What did I say to you in Xianghua Building that day? If you still remember, you should know that I'm a person who will seek revenge for hatred. I will pay you back double." Lu Ling slowly blinked and slowly put down her hand. If her memory was not damaged, she should remember that in Xianghua Building that night, Li Yunxin deliberately shook her mind and wanted to capture her heart. But she was arrogant and didn't completely surrender. At this moment, Li Yunxin said it in such a furious tone. Any smart person would know that he was implicitly saying, "I will find a way to save you from this suffering." Lu Ling was a smart person, but now she was a weak, slow but still strong-willed smart person. Of course there were many things she didn't figure out, but it didn't prevent her from recognizing one fact. At least for her at this moment, Li Yunxin was more reliable than anyone else in Dongting. Therefore she slowly put down her hand and glared at Li Yunxin. "The Tao of nature is clear. When all the masters in my cave come out, all of you. It seemed that Lu Ling felt that it was too slow and embarrassing to talk like this, so she simply stopped talking or moving. She just closed her eyes and stood there straight, slightly raising her head. Li Yunxin breathed a sigh of relief. At least for now she hasn't been exposed. However, whether or not he should save Lu Ling would depend on how the situation changed. Now the situation in the city of Wei is treacherous. Her fate is no longer in the hands of anyone. However, at this time Hong Yangzi suddenly reached out and patted on the side of the boat again. The boat sped away from the sheep, again. Li Yunxin slightly frowned. "Hong Yangzi, you have taken me to see her. What do you plan to do next? Now you should know that Ling Kongzi is not dead." Red Madam interrupted his words. "Then you should also know that if Daotong really comes looking for us, first, my Juanfu is not afraid of them, and second, he still has this Ling Kongzi in his hands. Return Ling Kongzi to Daotong, and that will be a contribution to the protection of the Heavenly Abode's disciple." Red Lady paused for a moment before she caressed Li Yunxin's chest. "You and that person are really different. This is the second time you've mentioned that man. Are you talking about Du Sheng or the 9th young master?" Red Madam finally sat up and reluctantly left Li Yunxin. She slightly raised her head and looked at him. "You are so close to him, but you are completely different." She stretched out her hand and used her cold fingertips to brush past Li Yunxin's cheek. "You speak gently, smile gently, and recite poems beautifully. You are also good-looking. I have never seen such a good-looking person like you in White Heron Continent. You are even more good-looking than the 9th young master." She smiled again. "Even though I know you are lying to me, I still can't help but admire you." Li Yunxin slightly narrowed his eyes. "Lie to you?" Red Madam stood up and looked at Li Yunxin. She slowly retreated to the bow of the white jade ship. The tenderness on her face slowly faded. She only looked at him, as if she knew him but didn't know him. I once heard from Du Sheng that there are many good women in the world, but they like fickle men. At that time I also thought, why is that? But later I knew. That fickle man. Although his heart is fickle and he makes promises lightly, he is gentle, considerate and attentive to every woman. He is so good. Even if I know it is just a momentary happiness, I can't help but cherish it. What do the women in this world love? They love only this tenderness and sweetness. With this tenderness and sweetness, what's the use of being a moth darting into the fire? Red Madam sighed again in a low voice. My father has to avenge the 9th young master. But he has been imprisoned for 2,000 years. He is not in a hurry. In his opinion, Daotong is a big mountain that can't be moved easily. So what if he killed Ling Kongzi and that Taoist in the city? Daotong will kill all the Yin gods in the world sooner or later. Sooner or later he will have the chance to avenge. If he wants to kill, he will kill by Yunxin first. So, my dear, you asked him to avenge Longjiu now? But you are thinking too much. And if you want to be the Lord of Wei River or the Lord Dongting, you are thinking too much. My father is imprisoned in this Dongting. In fact, he is also stationed in this Dongting. There is a big secret under this 1,000-mile Dongting that you all don't know. No matter what you do, my father will never leave here. Her words made Li Yunxin's brows furrow even tighter. Until he heard Red Madam say, so, you think that Dongting and Wei River used to be the waters under the jurisdiction of your 9th brother and that it is a safe place? You are wrong. Now this place is the most dangerous place in the world. A string is plucked in Li Yunxin's heart, making a clanging sound. He realizes where the problem is. This Red Madam now seems to think that he is the hatred who was defeated in the battle, extremely weak and fled here. He finally understands what the sentence, "You are really different from him," means. And he also understands why she asked him if he wanted to be the Lord of Wei River before. Although the inference is wrong, but what a smart Red Madam. Li Yunxin's face suddenly changes. He immediately sits up straight on the boat and looks at her seriously. You know? How do you know? Red Madam raises her head slightly and looks at him. She suddenly smiles. I also love your mighty appearance now. I know this. Well, it's because you attracted the 9th heaven thunder fire. You killed the Taoist priest, but you didn't know that I have spies in the city and saw you. My father and I know what happened in the Li Kingdom. Besides, I led you to this Dongting Lake. Under the lake there is a way to distinguish the dragon aura on you. It is Dragon Sun. Only Dragon Sun has the aura. But this is also the secret of Dongting. You don't know it, but you are not ignorant. But I didn't expect that you are so badly hurt. Red Madam slowly steps forward and stretches out her hand to Li Yunxin. She smiles. Then, my dear, without waiting for her to finish her sentence, Li Yunxin immediately leaped up and flew in the direction from which she had just come. His only miscalculation is that he didn't think of the so-called method in Dongting Lake that Red Madam said. He has many ways to deal with and even get information when the other party is ambiguous. However, once a big demon like Lord Dongting proves his identity in a way that he believes in, he can't be persuaded by words. Damn it. He underestimates this big demon who has been in Dongting for 3,000 years. Just when he used his magical power to escape and Red Lady arrived on the white jade boat, the water of Dongting Lake suddenly turned black. It is dark in the night, but at least under the moonlight, it is as black jade. However, at this moment the water becomes like a pool of thick ink. There is a huge monster under the water. Li Yunxin doesn't know whether it is Lord Dongting or not, but he knows that he can't win if he fights with the big demon in Dongting Lake. Therefore he activates all his wakan and flees a few miles away in one breath. He can see the wooden pavilion by Dongting. However, when he is about to land on the shore, Red Madam's white jade boat is a magic weapon. It is even faster than him, it catches up with him. Red Madam shouts at him in the roaring wind. Li Yunxin won't give her a chance to finish her words. He just hits the ghost cultivator's chest with his palm. Of course he can try to kill her, but that will block his momentum. Besides, he wants to seriously injure her and send her flying. Her father loves her so much that he will definitely block his momentum to land and hide 10 feet away from Dongting. With a muffled bang, Red Madam immediately flies back like a kite with a broken string. With the force of this blow, Li Yunxin is finally 10 feet away from Dongting with the wind and clouds. He turns around and looks back. However, he sees a giant palm made of water suddenly appears on the lake surface. It hits Red Madam and sends her flying again. He hears a muffled shout, "You unfilial son." Li Yunxin's eyes widen, and then he is stunned in place. Red Madam's body falls at his feet with a bang. Her clothes are broken and her hair is messy. Dark golden blood oozes out of her mouth and nose. It drips on the ground and evaporates like water drops on a red soldering iron. Li Yunxin's eyelashes tremble slightly. After this blow, the giant palm made of water disintegrates and falls back into the lake. The huge shadow under the water also disappears. He looks at Dongting Lake and then at Red Madam on the ground. He takes a step back subconsciously. You. After a long time he says, you. He doesn't help her up, so Red Madam just lies quietly on the ground. The night is as dark as ink and the wind in the pines is whispering. Only after a quarter of an hour did Red Madam move slightly. She coughs a few times and then slowly props herself up from the ground. She raises her hand to wipe the corner of her mouth and looks at Li Yunxin again. Looking at his silly, surprised and hesitant look, she smiles. My dear, you are so cruel. I just want to tell you to go away, and don't come back. What? Li Yunxin takes another step back, puts his hands behind his back and clenches them tightly. Why did you take me to the lake tonight? Red Madam stands up slowly. She doesn't speak but looks at Dongting Lake behind her with narrowed eyes. Then she slowly walks to the wooden pavilion a few steps away and sits on the railing again. She looks at Li Yunxin and whispers, because I love you. After saying this, she seems to find it very interesting. She laughs again and splashes a few drops of pale golden blood. My father, he wants to take you away. Although I don't know what he will do after taking you, I know it won't be a good thing. As for me, I come to ask you, my dear, would you like to go back to Dongting with me? You said yes. She looks at Li Yunxin and says with a smile like a girl recalling sweet things, I also said that my father may not avenge you immediately. But even so, my dear, would you like to go back to Dongting for me? You said yes. She stops and remains silent for a while. Although I know you are coaxing me, but I am still happy in my heart. I was more happy to stay with you on the boat for a while. In fact, I want to tell you those things so that you can be on guard. It's just that my monarch father came too early. My dear, you are too impatient. Li Yunxin tightens his lips and looks at her. Red Lady also looks at him. After watching for a while, she shakes her head slightly. I know you don't love me. But since you don't love me, why did you tease me that day? A girl's heart is fragile, Li Lang. Not as fragile as your heart of stone. After saying this, she becomes silent again. Li Yunxin is also silent. Finally, a small fish jumps out of the water and falls back into the water. Red Lady stands up and slowly walks to the Dongting. If you want to go somewhere else, you can go. If not, my father won't try again since he didn't catch you this time. He once said, if you could do something in the city of Wei such as killing that Taoist priest, it would be a relief for him. Then, when the time comes, there's no harm in talking about something else. Red Lady slowly steps into the water and turns to smile at Li Yunxin under the moonlight. I really hope I can see that day. Li Yunxin suddenly raises his head and steps forward, asking, what does really hope mean? But why do you want to help me? Red Madam smiled sadly. Li Lang, there are some things. There are not so many schemes and schemes. In this world, there is really pure love, even if it is just a temporary temper. You heartless lover, the west wind blows the old Dongting waves. One night my hair turns white. After getting drunk, I don't know, the sky is in the water, the boat is full of clear dreams. The Milky Way. You must write this poem for me. Remember me. After saying this, she leans up and falls straight into the water. The turbid waves of the Dongting Lake suddenly surges and swallows her in a moment. Li Yunxin frowns and looks at all this, then he waits. But this time, nothing happens. He waits until the dawn and the morning light first appears. He waits until it gets dark and the moon rises in the west. Then he looks around blankly and murmurs to himself, this is... what trick? Chapter 160. When the bright moon hung high above the yellow pine tree by the cliff, the last believer who came to the mountain to pay his respects finally left. Lu Laodao carefully inspected the main hall of the mountain god temple, then locked the door. There were no valuable things in the hall, only some clay statues. These statues could be made by the clay craftsmen of Egret Island, and it would only cost a dime of silver to make one. But he knew that these clay statues were not just clay statues, they had spirits. He knew about these spirits and he had dealt with them before. However, humans and demons were different, and he felt that he should not get too involved. In fact, it was not that he had any special opinion of demons, there were not many good ones among them, What special opinion could he have? It was just that he had been a temple attendant for so many years and he knew a lot of things. He knew that some demons could use their supernatural powers and do good deeds. However, it was hard to get rid of one's nature. You could not tell when they would suddenly do strange things that made people's hearts jump. But these few, well, the blue dragon envoy, the white dragon envoy, the black dragon envoy, the red dragon envoy, and that strange dragon prince, and the soul of the Chow family's child were different. Lu Laodao once overheard them preaching in the hall when he got up at night. That dragon prince talked about 3 views to the 4 demons. Lu Laodao listened for a while until his hair was wet from the night dew, then he went back to his room. In the middle of the next night, he could not help but eavesdrop outside the room. Halfway through, there was suddenly no more movement in the hall. After a while, he heard the strange dragon prince say, that old guy outside the room. Oh no, not old guy, oh, my dragon cult sect leader elder? What are you eavesdropping on? I am teaching on behalf of the cult leader. Lao Dao knew that he was discovered, so he sighed and pushed the door open. He told the dragon prince who was attached to the golden statue that he couldn't see clearly, 3 views are not something that you can say. It's not something like, if you believe in the dragon cult, you must build 3 Taoist temples when you establish your own sect. Instead it referred to outlook on life, worldview and values, these 3 things. As he said this, he remembered the past. Actually, it hadn't been that long. Only a month had passed, but it felt like it had happened yesterday. He thought of Brother Xian in the courtyard of the Dragon King Temple, slowly drinking under the thin bamboo while talking to him about the water cloud force. From time to time she would say a few words that he couldn't quite understand, and then she would laugh. When Lao Dao thought of this, he stood in the hall and sighed. Then he realized that the hall had quietened down. His heart tightened as he thought, Aya, how could I be so muddle-headed? These are demons after all, and I have angered them. Unexpectedly, after a breath's time, that dragon prince suddenly cried out, saying, Aya, you're right. Aya, the cult leader really said that night, and so on. Then he forced himself to talk for the whole night. What else could he talk about? Although he knew that Li Yunxin had taught these demons, he didn't know to what extent. According to the rules, after he received Li Yunxin's water cloud force without permission, he couldn't teach it to anyone else. He didn't even teach it to Shirquizi. So, he picked up some of the things that happened when they were together in the past, and those demons listened attentively. Gradually, he felt that these demons didn't seem to be that afraid of people anymore. However, when he slept the next day, he felt a lingering fear. Could it be that those demons had used some kind of innate ability to bewitch his mind? Then in a daze he felt unhappy. When Brother Xian was alive, he always had a lot of courage in his heart. Even when he saw that big demon, he wasn't afraid. Now that he wasn't here, although he heard that the child he reincarnated created this dragon cult, but still, Lu Laodao sighed. He walked into the house under the moonlight. The light in Shirquizi's room was still on, which was a habit these days. Only after he cleaned the courtyard and went back to the house and turned off the light, did the woman turn off the light and go to sleep. When he walked out of the house, he coughed lightly. This was also a habit. He told the woman that he was going to sleep. Then Lu Laodao pushed the door open, turned around and closed it. This house wasn't like the Dragon King temple he lived in the city of Wei. The walls were made of yellow earth. After he came, Shirquizi used toilet paper to frame the walls, but when he lit a fire outside to cook, the toilet paper would smell burnt. However, this smell didn't annoy Lu Laodao, except that it was a little choking. On the contrary, he felt very comfortable. It was a fire. There was a woman making a fire to cook, so the burnt smell was a little like home. He felt that he would probably slowly settle down on Nanshan Hill. Slowly he turned around. There was no light in the house, and the paper on the window was not very transparent. Therefore, after he came in, it took a while for his eyes to adjust to the light in the house. Then he could see a person sitting by the rough wooden table at the end of the kong, bathed in the moonlight. Lu Laodao sighed softly as if he was afraid that his heavy breathing would startle that person, so he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Then he heard that person say with a familiar voice, I know that you have broken through the conception realm and reached the emptiness realm. You can't cultivate by yourself when you reach the emptiness realm. Without someone to guide you, it is easy to make mistakes. I thought about it, and came. Lu Laodao gasped a few times, feeling that his breath was slightly hot and trembling. He looked around in panic, wanting to reach out to prepare something, but he felt that there was nothing he could do. After thinking for a while, he remembered that there was half a pot of cold tea on the wooden table next to that person, but it wasn't any good tea. After drinking it, his mouth was full of foam. After panicking for a while, he suddenly calmed down. He let out a long sigh and said, "Brother XN is right. But when I reached the emptiness realm, I always felt that the snow mountain was unstable and the sea of Qi was in a mess, so I didn't dare to continue cultivating." As he spoke, he slowly walked to the opposite side of that person, pulled a lame stool over and sat on it, so that he could see the person's face more clearly. That was really Brother Xian, a living person. He sat leisurely on the rattan chair, leaning against the back with his arms resting on the armrests. He didn't look at himself but tilted his head to look at the window. The window paper was originally a little yellow, but under the moonlight, it became bright white. He stared at the bright white window paper. He looked calm, but Lu Laodao saw that he was squinting slightly. The shadows cast by his eyelashes on his face would occasionally tremble slightly. His lips were also pursed just like how he used to be. It seemed that in the next moment, some faint, playful and surprising words would come out. This was Brother Xian. Lu Laodao let out a sigh of relief and said, "A few days ago when I circulated the qi to the third level of the water cloud force and reached the Han Xiaoyang, I felt uncomfortable in my chest. I didn't care and continued to circulate the qi. Unexpectedly, after another 15 minutes, Qing Ling Yuan, Jiaosuan, Er Men, and Si Zhu Kong all felt that something was wrong. I almost lost my breath." "What time was it?" Li Yunxin didn't move and only asked indifferently. "Just past the hour of the night. I thought the next hour would be the meeting of dragons and tigers." "The time is wrong." Li Yunxin sighed slightly, still staring at the window paper. "Usually the hour of the night is correct. But the position of the South Mountain, the solar terms, the hour of the night a few days ago belonged to the Western Earth, so of course you would make a mistake. But you haven't touched that Shirquizi these days? Otherwise you wouldn't have gone astray with the balance of yin and yang." Lu Laodao blushed and said embarrassedly, "Well, how can that be?" At this time Li Yunxin turned around and looked at Lu Laodao, finally smiling. "You thought I was dead. Now that you see me again, why aren't you excited at all? It's so sad." Lu Laodao didn't say anything. After a moment of silence he also smiled. "I know Brother Xian doesn't like that kind of tone. If I were to cry and say, 'Ah, you're not dead and what happened these days?' Brother Xian would feel annoyed and embarrassed. Maybe he would immediately run away and only return after 2 or 3 days. Li Yunxin smiled and sighed. "It's still more comfortable talking to you. Old Lu, I've missed you these days." The two of them sat facing each other for a while. Li Yunxin sat up straight on the rattan chair and was lost in thought again. Lu Laodao didn't know what he was thinking about. He sat with him for a while and saw that Lu Laodao didn't want to say anything. He quietly got up, took the teapot from the table, pushed the door open and went out. After a while, there were faint sounds of people talking, cups clinking, and firewood being carried from outside the room. Then, slowly, the smell of burning toilet paper wafted into the room. After a quarter of an hour, Lu Laodao pushed the door open again and came in. There was a wooden tray in his hand, a pot of tea and a pile of dried sweet potatoes on the tray. He gently placed the wooden tray on the table next to Li Yunxin and sat opposite him. He said, "There's nothing good. Brother Xian, fill your stomach first." Li Yunxin softly responded. Then he let out a long sigh. "Let's get down to business, old Lu. Let me ask you first. Since you know that I'm not dead and you've reached the emptiness realm, do you want to do great things with me?" Li Yunxin's sudden excitement surprised Lu Laodao slightly. But he also noticed that when Ting Qingshan said this, his eyes drifted outside the door and stopped on the dried sweet potatoes for a while. However, he didn't think too much about it, because what Ting Qingshan said required him to think carefully. But he only thought carefully for a moment. Then he said, "Yes." Li Yunxin looked at him seriously and said, "I'm not a human anymore. I'm now the body of Dragon Sun Chiwen. In other words, I'm a demon." Lu Laodao let out a sigh of relief. "Isn't it better? What's the fun of being a human? And you have to know that there's a 3,000-year big demon in the Dongting Lake. There's a Taoist priest in the city of Wei. That big demon is not a friend, and that Taoist priest is an enemy. Moreover, it was I who schemed to kill that 9th young master in Lingkongzi. When I raised my eyes and looked around, there were strong enemies everywhere." Lu Laodao smiled. "Brother Xian, I'm not the Hunyuanzi anymore. Now my real name is Lu Gongzan." Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said, "So before, I even treated you as a chess piece. Now I ask you if you want to do great things with me. I want to turn you from a hidden chess piece to an open chess piece. You'll return to the city of Wei and face many people and things. The Taoist priest in the realm of Wei will take action. Maybe soon there will be helpers. You'll become my signboard. You'll attract many people's attention and bear great risks. I like to scheme. But schemes may not succeed every time. Once I'm wrong, you may die. You'll die for real. You can't become a ghost cultivator. Lu Laodao smiled. Will it be glorious and imposing when you return to the city of Wei? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and laughed. You'll return to the city of Wei as the hierarch of the dragon cult. And I've made a lot of arrangements in the city of Wei. When you return, there will be gongs and drums, children clearing the way, and believers kneeling to worship you. It'll be glorious and imposing. Lu Gongzan spread out his hands. Then what else can I say? A real man is born in this world, isn't it to be majestic and imposing? Okay. Then, let me tell you about the current situation of Wei River and city of Wei. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and began to tell Lu Laodao in a calm tone about the earth-shattering things in the cultivation world these days, but not known by mortals. So he talked for a full hour. After he finished, Lu Laodao blinked his eyes and sighed, such a world, but the ghost emperor? He frowned slightly. The emperor of the Li kingdom indeed has many people, but there are other people or things such as the dragon sun hatred mentioned by Brother Xan. Hundreds of millions of people in the Li kingdom know the emperor of the Li kingdom, and they also know hatred. According to Laodao, I think there are more people who know hatred. After all, although the world is big, Brother Xan, you said that the Tulahan kingdom in the far west and the Quan kingdom in the far south would take more than 10 years to reach the capital of the Li kingdom on horseback. Such a long distance, maybe the people there don't know when the dead Emperor Li came to the throne, and they think that it is the previous Emperor Li who is managing the Li kingdom. But whether it is the Tulahan kingdom or the Quan kingdom, the people there all know the divine dragon, dragon son, and hatred, right? So, hatred obviously has more followers than the Emperor Li, but why is he not as strong as the Emperor Li? Or, in this Jianghu there are some famous people. The people who know them are no less than the people who know the Emperor. But why are those people not as strong as the Emperor? This is a good question, old Lu. Li Yunxin breathed a sigh of relief. No one told me about these things. But now that I have the body of Yin spirit, I am Qi Wen, and there are many people who know about this. I am afraid that the people who know about Qi Wen are more than the people who know about the Emperor Li. Why am I not as strong as him? I have experienced and thought about it for a long time, and I vaguely understand some of the rules. For example, old Lu, you do not have to worry about food and clothing, and you worship a god at home. When you have nothing to do, you go to him and pray for peace in your home. You believe in him and respect him, and you give him the power of faith every day. But he has never shown his divinity in front of you. Although you believe in his existence just like the common people in this world, how can there be anyone who truly believes in him? What they saw was something that could be seen, something that could be touched. They know that the officials in the city are people, and they know the emperor. Although the emperor is unreachable, they also know that he is a person. He is a real person like himself. Every day he lives in the emperor's territory, obeys the emperor's laws, is controlled by the officials sent by the emperor, and has to pay taxes for the emperor. These are all real, inextricably linked things. People know that it is true, and they know that the emperor is there. They believe that the emperor is there. If someone jumps out and says, well, maybe the emperor doesn't exist. Then what if the emperor's laws don't work? People will laugh at him for being crazy. But those gods, the gods that you worship in your home. If someone says, well, maybe the god you worship is not there at all, maybe he doesn't hear you and he won't show his divinity. What are the reactions of ordinary people? I also know that he may not really show his divinity, I just want to be at ease, right? You have been a temple attendant for so many years, you must have heard this kind of thing a lot. So for me there are also two kinds of faith, strong faith and weak faith. You worship the God in your home, this is weak faith. You feel that he should be there but you are not very sure, and you are not sure that he will show his divinity in your home. The people in the world know that hatred is there, they scare the child when he cries. If you cry again, hatred will come and take you away. Even if you say that, who would really believe that hatred will come from the world and take the child away? This is still weak faith. Those who know me, Qi Wen, those who know Wei River Dragon King, well, they know that there is a temple here. But, do they talk about it normally? Only when the weather is dry or hot will they sigh and say, oh my, why doesn't it rain, Lord Dragon King? Forget it, continue watering the vegetable garden. This is still weak faith. As for the emperor, you have committed a crime today and you have been caught and beaten, you have violated the emperor's laws. That is when you know that you have angered the emperor, violated the rules, and are beaten. This kind of faith is many, many times stronger than the faith in your God, the faith in hatred, and the faith in me, Chiwen. I call it strong faith. Think about it later. So many people believe so strongly in the existence of the emperor of the Li Kingdom. So many people believe that the Li Kingdom is the largest and strongest empire in the world. Since Emperor Li can rule such a huge empire, then Emperor Li is also mighty and imposing. Then, Emperor Li died. You go and tell an ordinary citizen that Emperor Li is dead. The citizen will say, "Oh my, Emperor Li is actually dead. Such a powerful emperor is actually dead." He will think about more things. If he is a citizen of the empire, then he will panic, be surprised, and worry. Will the world be in chaos after the emperor is dead? If there is chaos, the most unlucky people are the citizens. How good it would be if the emperor is not dead. There will even be people who sincerely, spontaneously, mourn and cry for Emperor Li from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of faith is already far more than strong faith. This is a kind of explosive super strong faith. Hundreds of millions of people, this kind of super strong faith, almost in a few days, added to the ghost of Emperor Li. The ghost emperor created in this way, of course, is strong. Chapter 161. After Li Yunxin said this, he narrowed his eyes slightly. As for why that black Bai Yanjun didn't take Emperor Li's soul away in time. This is the strangest thing. What he said was something that Lu Laodao had never thought of. But Lu Laodao was not a stupid person after all. After listening to him and thinking about it carefully, he understood. After thinking about it, he asked again, "But if that's the case, why don't you show your divinity?" Li Yunxin knew what he meant. He raised his eyebrows, poured a cup of lukewarm tea and took a sip, then looked at Lu Laodao. Because there are those stinky Taoist priests and stinky swordsmen. The people of Daotong and Kenzo, those low-level disciples, walk around the world. What do you think they do? When they see demons that often show their divinity, they say that demons have repeatedly appeared and caused trouble in the world, so they killed them. And demons themselves are not good things, and they also like to do bad things. So, when you see a demon in the wild, of course, you quickly cover the eyes and mouth of the child and run away in a hurry. When you get home, you don't dare to say it everywhere. First of all, I don't have a good impression of demons and I think it's bad luck. Second of all, I'm afraid that if I keep saying it, I'll really provoke demons. Look at those children shouting about ghosts in the middle of the night, and when the ghosts come, they'll be scolded by the adults. That's it. As for those big demons that low-level disciples can't afford to provoke, there's still the Daotong. There are only 100 known big demons above the true state, and they are scattered all over the world. There are also many fights between them. And the Daotong and Kenzo have hundreds of cultivators above the true state, and they work together. Which big demon would dare to appear in the world again and again to recruit believers? Look at that ghost emperor, his cultivation is close to the two saints, but he was still killed by 5 cultivators at the risk of their lives. And yet, he fled to the sky-piercing lake and ran into hatred. As Li Yunxin spoke, he shook his head as though he was amused and annoyed at the same time. 2 great demons. In such a situation, instead of helping each other, they started fighting again. Both of them are crippled. What af asterisk king retard. Look at Daotong and Kenzo. Old Taoist Lu hurriedly smiled apologetically and poured more tea for Li Yunxin. But these few envoys of our Shenlong Jiao, from what I've seen over the past few days, they're all very good. They are not as savage as other fiendish demons. Li Yunxin shook his head and sighed. No one knew what he was sighing about. He looked at the tea that Lu Laodao had poured for him, then his eyes drifted to the dried sweet potatoes on the wooden plate. Laodao thought for a moment, then reached out and pinched a piece. Brother Xian, you can try this. Jinyang. That fellow Taoist made it himself. It's clean and chewy. Li Yunxin subconsciously reached out his hand. But it was just a movement and he quickly withdrew it. He looked at the dried sweet potatoes again and said in a low voice, "I'm not hungry." This was the first time Lu Laodao saw him lose his composure like this. His eyes flashed and he put down the dried sweet potato. Li Yunxin was silent for a moment, then asked him, "Are you tired?" Lu Laodao shook his head. "After all, I'm an emptiness realm cultivator. I don't get tired easily." Li Yunxin responded and was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly said, "AI. Actually, the path of Shindao and the path of human cultivation, do you think there are any similarities?" "There are." Why do you think Dao Tong and Kenzo need to go through the heavenly tribulations? They abandon their feelings one by one, and in the end they make themselves strange as if they're mentally ill. For example, they don't see humans as humans. From a certain point of view, they've cultivated into demons. But you old Lu, think again. An ordinary person without any unforgettable experiences has always been raised in a rich mansion. He can't be said to have a noble character, nor can he be said to be wicked beyond redemption. He's just an ordinary person. Then one day you give him great power, open the door and tell him to go. Then this person walks into the marketplace, and after a long time, this dress looks good, I want it. That beauty looks good, I want it. This mansion looks good, I want it. This beautiful world, this beautiful land, there are too many good things. Ordinary people will also be greedy and want, but they can only work honestly, occasionally swindle, and spend some effort to obtain it. And this person wants it, and reaches out to take it. Because there are almost no opponents in this world. But how can this be done? The world will be in chaos. You say, using morals and rules to restrain this matter? There will always be loopholes. Then we might as well renounce our feelings and abandon our desires. Without those desires, we can wholeheartedly seek immortality, and the world will be much better. That's why Dao Tong and Kenzo have to cultivate their hearts and undergo tribulations. It's not all for the world but also for yourself. You have so many desires and they can be easily obtained, so why would you have the mood to focus on improving? Li Yunxin looked at Lu Laodao, but his eyes slid to the sweet potato for a moment, and then bounced away as if he had been electrocuted. As for Yin spirits? Demons? They absorb the power of will and the power of faith. How can there be so many problems? Below the Taishang emotionless state, they can't be bothered to undergo tribulations. That's why you see demons do whatever they want, but in reality they are abandoning themselves. With so many great demons, if they manage them well, they might have more believers, more power of will, and become stronger. But they have so many desires, to eat people, to look at their neighbors, to sleep for a year or two when they are tired, and so on. Demons also have desires and they don't know how to restrain themselves. So how can they fight against Dao Tong and Kenzo? Not to mention, to step into the Taishang emotionless state like the two sages, they need something else. This is the same for cultivators and demons. That's why Emperor Li is at the peak of the profound realm, approaching the two sages, but he can never reach the two sages. The peak of the profound realm is a threshold, there is no way to take advantage of it. Li Yunxin sighed. My parents told me that below the peak of the profound realm, as long as the demons have enough power of will, they can directly rush up. But once they reach that threshold, if they want to cross it, they have to go through the tribulation step by step, just like human cultivators. But human cultivators have been passed down for thousands of years, and almost from the beginning, they start to abandon their emotions and desires, step by step. And that demon is already in the profound realm. How do you expect him to go through those tribulations? Delusion tribulation? He wants the Taishang Dao. How can he let it go? So I say, why don't those great demons show their divinity and gather incense? I think they should also know this. When Li Yunxin said this, he suddenly fell silent. And fell silent for a long time. Lu Laodao listened to him in silence. At this time he sighed slightly. After a moment of hesitation, he reached out his hand and gently patted on Li Yunxin's knee. Brother Xan, are you feeling vexed? Tell me about it. He knew that Li Yunxin tonight was very different from before. In the past, Li Yunxin also laughed and scolded angrily. He often used words like idiot and retarded to criticize others. But at that time, other people's business was other people's business. Brother Xan stood on the shore and talked about them. But tonight, Brother Xan, although he spoke with fervor and assurance, but Lu Laodao knew that he was also immersed in his emotions. Just now, when he took the sweet potato, he lost his composure, but in fact he lost his composure from beginning to end tonight. At this moment, Brother Xan couldn't control his emotions very well. Just like how he used to judge others, this person was full of loopholes. This Lao Dao sighed with mixed feelings in his heart, because he realized that at this time Brother Xan came to find him. He had given his most vulnerable moment to her. Li Yunxin turned his head. He stared at the white paper window for a while and suddenly asked gloomily, "Then, are you willing to part with your fellow Taoist?" Just now, when he talked about demons, Dao Tong and Kenzo, he was very impassioned. But now he seemed to have lost his spirit and even his voice was a little hoarse. Lu Laodao didn't expect him to ask this. But looking at his expression, it wasn't a joke. So he thought seriously, In this world there are always gains and losses. Fellow Taoist Shirquizi took me in when I was in trouble, and I am grateful for her kindness. I also love her. But now, in this situation between you and her, if I leave her, Lao Yen said, she will be sad for some time, but it will get better. Feelings, alas. I, Lao Dao, am a man of experience. I won't be able to endure it for long. At first I will feel sad, but as time passes, it will fade. In the end there will still be someone who can't let go. But I can't let go, and it's just a thin thread that connects my thoughts with that person. Knowing that there is such a thread and such a person, it is no longer very tight. And Brother Xian, there will always be a lot of inconveniences if you leave me. That is a matter of life and death. At this point he heard a light sound outside the door. Then came the sound of extremely light footsteps, and the sound of the door closing very carefully. Lu Laodao suddenly stood up and looked at the door. But he only looked for a while, then slowly turned around and sat down again. Alas, that's good. He sighed, that's good. Li Yunxin looked at him. Tell me what happened when you came here. Lu Laodao smiled bitterly. After thinking for a while, he slowly told him what happened during those days. My real name is Lu Gongzan. I was a bandit in my early years and my nickname is Ghost Teller. I killed a constable just now and I have nowhere to go. Do you dare to let me in? Li Yunxin sighed and smiled. So after you said that, she didn't ask you anything and only let you stay. In fact, during these days, demons and Daotong cultivators might have come looking for you. Whoever came would be a disaster. You too. Shirquizi can barely say that you have the concept. You're just an ordinary person who learned some body-strengthening martial arts. But she took you in. And she might die because of you, old Lu. How can there be such a sentimental and foolish woman in this world? Li Yunxin looked down. All the men in this world have hearts of stone like us. Lu Laodao slowly frowned. Brother Xnu, I provoked a girl, said Li Yunxin. I don't know how I feel right now. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.